Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Yes, I'm ready tomorrow. A young 19-year-old girl said. Her name was Julia. She was an orphan now. Now, my dear, answered Grandpa, filling the various holes in the sewing machine with oil. Well, it's going to last a year, Grandpa said, pushing it to the middle of the big folding table. Oh, thank you, Grandpa. Thanked him Julia, hugging and kissing him on the cheek. Now for sure all the lines will be perfect, she exclaimed, running her hand over the sewing machine. But everyone at the table. The soup will get cold, said the girl, going to the kitchen. Maybe it will come out. What of it? Grandfather scratched the back of his head, adjusted his shirt, and came to the table. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of freshly cooked soup. Salad from a couple of eggs, and with cucumber perfectly complemented the lunch. The grandfather and his granddaughter started the meal. Oh, my daughter, with your talents you could go anywhere, said the grandfather, sending another spoonful into his mouth. Well, just anywhere. Pepper, asked Julia, and peppered her plate. Yes, I guess so, replied Grandpa. Within minutes, the plates were empty. Without drinking her tea, Julia went to her room. She couldn't wait to finish sewing a woman's elongated shirt, a model she had designed herself. The girl sat down at the sewing table and straightened the shirt, the color of young grass. Joining the two pieces front and back, she made a couple of side seams, then sewed the sleeves together rather quickly and moved on to the collar. The case argued. The girl's hands themselves longed to hold the fabric between her fingers, fold it, pull it taut, and pedal the machine. Wow, it's just magic, Julia marveled every time. Then literally for a couple of hours in front of her was woven a new interesting thing from the material that had been lying in the closet for years. She got the fabric from her grandmother, and the machine was given to her by a neighbor for pennies. She took another one, new and modern. Then Julia received this machine practically as a gift. Her happiness was unbounded. Finding curtains in the closet, Julia could not resist and sewed herself a blouse from them. What was her grandfather's surprise when he noticed the familiar embroidery on the sleeve of the blouse, which his wife had once made to cover the iron-burned stain. Wait, I can't understand, the grandfather said, scrutinizing his granddaughter's cover. Where did you get this fabric? Isn't that our curtain? Said he looked at Julia in surprise. Yes, Julia answered correctly, thinking it would upset the grandfather. Well, Julia, you're crazy, he laughed. But you are an artist. Laughing, grandfather laughed. It turned out cute anyway, he concluded. Then Grandpa went into the back room. After digging there for about 20 minutes, he came back with a gray suitcase with a padlock hanging from its handle. I forgot to tell you, he began. Here's your dowry, said Alexa's grandfather. Let's see what we have here, he said, opening two locks with a small, almost toy key. Juliet eagerly waited to see what the lid of the suitcase opened. In front of Julia lay neatly folded different colors of fabrics in green, and blue, and polka dots, flower, and light and dense. Wow, exclaimed Julia, going through one fabric after another. Wow, she rejoiced. Do you look, what a beauty. The girl took the blue fabric and held it up to her. The color very well shades the tone of the face in Julia's head. Immediately began to pop up different options of what the dress could be. Unbelievable, Grandpa. Thank you. Why didn't you show me before? She asked. And before, and there was no need, replied Grandpa Alex, and then, leaving his granddaughter alone with the dowry, returned to his room. He approached the picture, which was lying on his dresser, and ran his fingers over the face of the image. It was his wife, beautiful hair on her head and a noble smile. It was said that this woman had lived a good life, filled with love and joy. What cannot be said about Julia's parents who died on the airplane? They were on a vacation together at the time. Little Julia was left with her grandparents. When everything happened, Alexa's wife couldn't take it and soon passed away. So Alexa's grandfather and Julia were left alone. The grandfather took care of the girl, putting all the love and tenderness that the parents had to pass on to her. But Julia grew up a troubled child. She was an average student with little interest in anything. At first, she wanted to become a veterinarian. But having seen once not the most pleasant picture in the veterinarian's office, she was cut off. Grandpa didn't demand much from his granddaughter. He just wanted her to be happy and with wisdom to life and the world. Julia could not enter the institute on a budgetary basis, so she went to college to specialize as a manager. Strange as it may seem, but Julia graduated from college with a red diploma. That was the joy of grandfather Alex. However, it turned out that in life the manager is not the one about whom the students were told in the educational institution. And moreover, in already existing companies, so-called managers from the street are not needed at all. So Julia learned that in the real world, a manager is a salesman, and Julia did not know how to sell. And in the store to work in, the girl lacked the nerve and courage. She would have stayed that way. Julia would have been out of business, if it were not for that neighbor who turned the wheel of fate for Julia. The sewing machine interested the girl very much. And it is not for nothing, because her grandmother and mother sewed very well. And with the availability of the internet, many skills and tricks for the willing open. Julia plunged headlong into the study of the rules of construction, varieties of stitches of different ideas. Now it was impossible to tear her away from sewing. At first, she often had to challenge the details and then sew again. One day, Julia was showing off to her grandfather Alex in her next blouse. "What do you think?" she asked with a twinkle in her eye. "Well, nothing so cute," answered Grandpa Alex. From his look, Julia realized that he was hiding something, that something was wrong. She asked, again going to the mirror and twirling around herself, examining herself from all sides. Seeing nothing, she turned to her grandfather again. "What?" she asked, looking at her grandfather, who was laughing with all his might. "Why are you laughing?" asked his granddaughter. "Oh, daughter, I can't understand why." "One sleeve sewn inside out?" laughed grandfather, no longer holding back. Julia went to the mirror again. Now she saw her mistake. Yes, doing one thing for too long can have that effect. "Well," said Julia, "you know, Grandpa, nowadays it is fashionable to experiment." "So I tried it," replied the granddaughter, trying to keep a nonchalant look. "Well, then, of course," replied the grandfather, and again rolled with laughter. However, over time, the girl burrowed and with not confused the facial side. Her skills increased. She stopped being afraid of the speed with which she sewed. Needed an electric machine. She learned to make even, beautiful stitches. Currently, Julia sewed for herself favorite and rarely on order for girlfriends and acquaintances. Since the girl did not know how to sell, she had to be satisfied with small customers. "You can post your work on VKontakte or another social network, right?" suggested her friend named Christina. Julia thought for a moment. Christina went to the table and picked up the skirt Julia had made for her. "Wow, how did you do it?" she asked, examining the fox shape that came out in the fabric. "Manual dexterity and no cheating." Julia joked back. "Do not realize, Christina, how lazy to sit on social networks." Julia said wistfully. "Julia, I need to wear a skirt today urgently." She smiled broadly. Her eyes sparkled with fire. Christina spun around near the mirror, turned this way and that, and ironed the skirt and adjusted it again. "It's decided," she said. "Tonight we'll go to a cafe," said the girl, admiring her reflection. "But what cafe?" "Today I have to finish opening the curtains," Julia objected. "You know, Julia, to work well, you must first have a good rest," said Christina. And on her way home, she left. "I'll meet you at the waterfront at 4 p.m. And Christina slammed the door. Julia was left standing at a loss. On the one hand, she had work to finish. On the other hand, she hadn't been out for a month. She looked at herself in the mirror. There in the reflection stood a pretty girl of medium build. Her white skin spoke of the fact that she rarely ever got out in the sun. Brown eyes, plump lips, and blonde hair. Clean-cut hair made Julia's face and herself a very even attractive person. The girl fidgeted at the mirror, then pulled her hair up and made her lips a tube. "Yes, I'm still growing up to Christina's confidence," she said. Then pulled out a summer brown and white polka dot dress. She had made it in the winter, but had never worn it. The dress emphasized Julia's figure very well, which had a slightly fuller veda and hips and sides. But this did not make her look worse. On the contrary, Her slight fullness gave her a certain charm. "Grandfather, I'll go with Christina." "Let's take a walk a little, because my head is spinning from sewing," she said, looking into the hall. Grandpa Alex read scientific literature. He liked to be interested in different theories and new views on life. Grandfather put the book aside. "But good," Grandpa Alex said. "Take some money," he said, holding out $10 at the cafe. "Maybe come in or to the movies," he said. Julia wanted to refuse at first. After all, Grandfather and so much does for her. But remembering about the buttons she bought for the new order, she agreed. "Thank you, Grandpa. You are so generous and kind." Hall, wrote her granddaughter, approaching her grandfather and hugging him by the shoulders. "Well, you will be enough to hang." Ami joked grandfather, screaming under the weight of the girl. Julia blurted out a smile and disappeared behind the door. Walking through the courtyard, she walked out towards the bus stop. The house they lived in was in a gardening community that was located near the city. It was surrounded by forest, fields, clean and fresh air. Julia liked this place. The bus came up on schedule, and the girl jumped into it. All the seats were taken. But in such a situation, it always turned out that someone always gave her a seat. The girl caught the eyes of women and men. To be exact, not on herself, but on her outfits. While riding the bus, the girl would casually leave business cards with her phone number. I can't say it worked, but it gave her hope that people would recognize her. "Wow, that's quite a style," Christina exclaimed when she saw Julia in her new dress. "What an incredibly beautiful polka dot. You did not show it to me." Indignant girlfriend. "No, I did." "Just you do not remember," answered Julia, at the same time Luba from her work on Christina. "Awesome. Well, let's go to her," said Christina, as if she were the most beautiful girls in the whole world. "Let's go for more eye contact," Julia replied, playing along with her. Christina was the kind of person who is always confident in herself. They know their worth and know what they want out of life. Well, or at least outwardly give that impression. Nevertheless, Julia enjoyed talking to her. She was lively, interesting, fearless, and besides, it always amused her. "Oh, I'm tired of work. I don't know where to put myself," Christina said, as she and Julia walked through the city along the waterfront. "I'm so tired of talking to customers. Show this one to that one. Explain to that one. We'll redo it." "Oh," she stretched out, complaining about the fatigue of work. "But I want to be weak and defenseless." She did not have time to finish. A nice-looking guy with a small black briefcase walked in front of her. Christina smiled at him, and with a puzzled look on her face, she suddenly asked him if you could help me. Christina handed the guy a closed bottle of water. "It was too strong," she said, lifting her left shoulder slightly upward. "Anything for you," answered the stranger, and taking the bottle from her hands, twisted the cork, then handed it back to Christina. "Thank you. You've been such a help to me." Flying Christina threw short glances at the guy. "Glad to help," the man replied and continued on his way. Christina watched her lips in frustration. "What man?" She stretched out, glaring at him. "Which one?" Julia interrogated her, as if she didn't know what she meant. "Let's go alone," said Christina, making a few glacis, lighting up the waters. The summer day was warm and even hot. Only a hat saved them from the sun. The wind played in the leaves of the trees. Passers-by were in a hurry. They were buying ice cream, walking with children. The fountain was growing, letting the water jet high up, then falling, stopped for a few seconds. "It's beautiful here," Julia asked, enjoying the walk. The girl looked around and was glad that she could just walk with her friend and talk about nothing. Of course, who spends most of his life in the forest? "Everything seems beautiful to him," Christina replied, making eye contact with a passing man. To a stranger. "Listen, because of your fox on your skirt, everyone looks at her and not at me. That's not fair." The girlfriend was outraged. "Or maybe not on the fox, but on your lovely thighs," said Julia. Christina was much scarier than Julia. Her figure was really enviable. Christina thought, maybe. She stretched, and they walked forward again. After 2 hours of walking, the girls were a little tired. The sun was getting too hot. It was time to go to the cafe. The girls made their order. Julia retired to the ladies' room. Walking back, she heard behind her back the girl, "Would you be kind enough to bring the 8th order?" Julia turned around. At the table sat a young guy about 25 years old. He smiled sweetly and showed something with his hands, trying to convey to Julia his request. "Yes, over there," he repeated, pointing to the steam table. Julia looked over there as well. There was indeed a tray of food standing there. The girl raised her hand to her chest and silently, "I asked." The guy nodded his head in response. Julia decided that this guy needs help, so she calmly went to the bar and took the tray with the order, and then carried it to the 8th table. "Thank you very much," replied the stranger. Julia furrowed her eyebrows. "But I'm not a waiter," she said, finally realizing the guy was playing a trick on her. "I know, but thanks anyway." As if nothing had happened, he replied. Julia, who had just been taken advantage of, could not hide her surprise. "Aren't you being a little insolent?" Julia asked. He asked her. "It's just a small request, and that's all," the stranger replied. Julia was even more indignant at his answer and looked away from his blue eyes. Coolly under the nose, in which stood various delicious things. "Then I have a small favor to ask of you too." She mumbled to put on a smile. "Yes." "And what is it?" asked the one, sending a piece of meat into his mouth. He began to chew it as if he were the king of the earth. "And I owe you a little dessert," Julia said, and took from under his nose cakes with whipped cream. "Hey," squealed the guy. "With your figure, I wouldn't make such a rash choice," smugly said the guy, and again dipped the meat in the sauce. "Send it into his mouth," and indeed, answered Julia. And with her other hand took a plate with a big mound of vegetable salad. "And wait." He indignantly tried to stop her. But Julia did not turn around and returned to her table. "Have you decided to watch your figure?" asked Christina, seeing a plate of fresh vegetables. "I decided to watch the people around me," Julia answered, and then began to eat a juicy salad. The guy who had recently lost his order, resentful, sat at the table. He was surprised and at the same time admired the way this brave girl fought back against him. However, he couldn't afford for anyone but him to be able to respond to him so cavalierly. The boy was slightly nervous. Finally finding something to say, he walked over to their table. "I apologize for interrupting your meal," he said to the girl. Christina's face glowed with a divine light. She listened to him, flapping her eyes. "But I must inform you that this is my order." "I paid for it," the guy said. "Yes, I know," Julia answered calmly, putting the last slice of tomato on her fork. Christina followed the developments carefully. The guy called for the waiter. "There's the girl, she took my order for herself," he complained to the cafe worker. The waiter stood at a loss, not knowing what to do. He asked for a receipt of payment. The guy began to look for the check, and not finding it, began to try to explain to the waiter the reason for its absence. While Julia calmly handed this check to the waiter, "Young man, I ask you to think of another, more intelligent reason to meet a girl," replied the cafe employee and left the company. The guy stood there with his mouth open, but when he saw that everyone around him was looking at him, he pulled on his jacket and, saying goodbye, left the cafe. The girls calmly continued their lunch. "What happened to impatience?" asked Christina. "You know, I really need to get out into the city more often," Julia answered, starting to eat the cakes. The friends laughed. After the walk and the cafe, they went home. Julia started sewing again. At this work, she calmed down and felt a good feeling inside. She liked working with the material. She liked the way the machine began to sew in her hands. Until a couple of years ago, there had been things between them. And disagreements. The machine was spitting now and then, the stiletto tangled threads, and once it just stopped and stopped sewing. Julia long persuaded her to return to work, until she discovered that the machine was not connected to the network. But that's all in the past. The girl skipped. "What did you decide on in the plans?" She was satisfied with the job done. The phone rang. Julia picked up the phone. A female voice said, "Julia." "Julia, hello. It's Wendy calling. The thing is that I can't wait long for the curtains to arrive by parcel. My nephew is picking them up." "Okay," she asked. Her voice was friendly and energetic. "Yes, good. They are ready. Can you come over?" Julia replied. "And he would also like to make a shirt for himself. Actually, it's my idea." I found the material. He's bound to like it. He's a bit of a nuisance, but that's okay. I want him to have a memory from his auntie with them. Please, from him Measures asked her politely. Okay, we'll do everything. Don't worry, Julia replied, knowing that this kind woman always pays well and is always satisfied with the result. An hour later, there was a knock on the door. Julia did not expect such a quick arrival. She opened the door and then went to pack the curtains. Well taken and alive, pronounced the nephew. I now shouted Julia from the room. Yes, we got in, she replied, stepping out into the hallway where her nephew was waiting for her. Julia, reaching through the curtains, looked up. In front of her stood the one with whom she had just yesterday quarreled. Hello, said the girl. Good afternoon, said the guy, drilled Julia cold blue eyes. There was silence. So you're the one who sews to order? He asked timidly. Yes, that's me, Julia replied, feeling extremely awkward. But what my aunt asked you to take my measurements, said the guy. Yes, of course, we'll do it right away. Julia replied kindly. Tell me your name, she asked. Max, he answered. And then he added, nice to meet you, Julia. He looked at the girl. Likewise. Without any intonation, she replied. When the measurements were taken and recorded in the magazine, Max was about to go home. Look, Julia, nice shirt off his neck. He's a nice guy, Alex's grandfather said, extending his hand in greeting. Max was a little confused. He didn't expect to see a gray-haired old man here. Then he shook his hand in return and went back home. From that day, Max and Julia began to meet, but they were not of a personal nature, but purely business. Before that, only one male customer had come to Julia, and that was an old friend of Max's grandfather. Julia was worried that because of the conflict in the cafe, Max would try to hurt her, but still she hoped for his judgment. Max was from a very wealthy family. His father worked as a lawyer and was highly regarded, and his mother was a bank manager. Growing up, Max did not need anything and always got what he wanted. He was the only child in the family, and therefore all the attention of both parents went only to him. In addition, he had an aunt, which Sol and him Nechaeva. She herself had 2 daughters, so Max was a favorite and spoiled child. He wanted to go to this institute. You're welcome. Didn't work out with the teachers. No big deal. We'll transfer you to another one. You want your own business? Try it. Here's some money for you. Need a car, please. A club to relax in. Son, you don't look so good today. Get a massage or go out with your friends or something. You haven't bought yourself anything in the last month. But go get money, hopefully, his mother said. Max lived a carefree and trouble-free life, surrounded on all sides by love and care. Max's parents did not hurry him to get married. They thought that it would be in time. When Max first appeared in Julia's house, he was extremely surprised by their modest dwelling. A narrow corridor, a small hall, and 2 almost 3-meter rooms. That was the end of their living space. How Julia managed to place a small corner to live, it remains a mystery after meeting Julia. Max was struck by her ability to be happy being in such conditions. Yes, there was a forest nearby, clean air. But still, in his opinion, it all looked kind of shabby. But despite that, Max wasn't going to get away with it. Such inexcusable behavior of the girl in the cafe. So every time he went to the shirt fitting, he kept complaining about the tightness in his shoulders, the width in his chest. One time he got seriously pissed off when he saw what the buttons on his shirt would be. What are those? Asked Max, coming to Julia to try on buttons for your shirt. Julia replied, as always in her calm tone, which caused Max to be even more annoyed. Do men's buttons look like that? Max asked, crossing his face in bewilderment. What do you think they should look like? Asked Julia, realizing that the guy was being picky. How do I know what they should look like? Isn't that my concern? He exclaimed, picking up one of the small white buttons and scrutinizing it closely. How does it look like a man's? Julia asked wryly. At that moment, Alexa's grandfather entered the room. But how is our boy happy here? He asked, looking at the shirt on the boy. Max looked from the seamstress to the grandfather and back again. Then, after a little silence, Uncle Alex answered. It's fine. Everything is fine with me, Max said. pulling a smile as wide as possible. Well, that's great. We've decided on button. Quickly concluded Julia to record the customer's consent in front of witnesses. Despite the fact that Alex's grandfather was already quite old, he inspired Mac's respect. If he could joke with Julia, then at the sight of Alex's grandfather, all the dope from him flew off in an instant. The guy felt awkward around him and even felt some weakness of his character. What could not be said about the old man's short haircut, gray head, tanned skin? Always well dressed. Alex's grandfather commanded respect. His dark brown, almost black eyes, staring at me point blank, made me feel fear. Already tomorrow morning I will be able to send your order to the address. And this is where we can say goodbye to you. Max. His name sounded special to her. Why send it? I'll pick it up myself, said the customer suddenly, looking at Julia. And then, to conceal the reason for his arrival, he added, I don't know. All right, as it will be convenient for you. Grandpa Alex, please escort the guest. Angelic voice asked grandfather-granddaughter. He fulfilled her request. Max from me. Alex was a little confused about the denouement and the end of their joint project. It was as if he did not want to say goodbye to the girl. The next day, the same grandfather Alex opened the door to Max. Good afternoon, Grandpa Alex. How do you say hello with a cheerful mood? Asked Max. Grandfather, extending his hand to the guy, replied that everything is fine. Except that the sewing machine again became capricious, said the grandfather. It needs oiling. His smile made the wrinkles on his face sharper, but from this his face was still as kind and friendly. Yes, technique as a woman requires attention, Max added, waiting for Julia to come out, but she still didn't show up. You've obviously come for a shirt, asked the grandfather. I'll get it in a minute, he said and disappeared into the workshop. Max was a little puzzled because he had hoped to see Julia. Here you go, said the grandfather, handing the guy a box that contained his new shirt. Thank you. Slowly, Max reached out. He held the box in his hands, twirling it around as if stalling for time. Then finally asked about Julia. Not her personally. Grandfather often called his granddaughter that. She went to town to the sewing store to buy thread, and she called out some names. Said she would only be there in the evening, replied Alexa's grandfather. Max was a little upset. He wanted to see the girl, but it did not happen. Having said goodbye, he left. When he returned home, he felt a strange feeling, a strange longing settled in his chest. An unfamiliar desire to see this girl had crept into his head again. He didn't think their meeting would end so quickly. The girl named Julia was definitely not what he was used to meeting in his life. Usually ladies themselves try to be the first to get acquainted with him, to become his girlfriend, to try to please him, to surround him with their attention and affection. But in Julia's life, there was a case that replaced her all around. He realized it immediately from the very minutes which she began to take measurements from him. Her gaze was soft and at the same time focused. It was interesting to watch her. When she was calculating the formula, at that second, she was looking directly at him. But it was as if she herself was somewhere else entirely at that moment. And when she grasped his wrists to take another measurement, Max felt the warmth and tenderness of her hands. But her grip was firm. As she grabbed, so she grabbed. Max sat down in the chair. He did nothing but stare silently straight ahead. For the first time in his life, he thought about how much passion this girl had in her life, how much she loved her work. This was something Max had never experienced before. He had never taken his endeavors seriously. He barely had time to start, but after a short time he lost interest. The very meaning of his endeavors and business projects lost interest. He realized that Julia was much stronger than he was, or rather her faith in herself and in her business was much stronger than she could imagine. Max slowly swayed both back and forth. At the moment, some realization was taking place within him about himself and his life. At that moment, the door to his room swung open, and a dog named Herman jumped into his lap at a run. The hunting spaniel, seeing his favorite friend, began to lick his face frantically. Max by inertia leaned back more than necessary. The chair lost its balance, and the guy with the pet in his arms fell on his back. The spaniel was frightened for his friend, and started licking Max's face with renewed vigor, trying to bring him to his senses. "Herman, no, stop it." Max covered himself with his hands, trying to keep the dog at arm's length. "Ah, Makamai, what's wrong, son?" The mother appeared in the doorway. Max looked at her upturned figure. "Are you not mistaken? Concerned?" she asked. Max, shouting and overcome by the unbridled tenderness of the dog, rose to his feet. "No, Mom, it's fine," he replied. Falling to the floor knocked a little of the homesickness that had come over him. "We have important guests coming for dinner on Friday. We need your presence," she spoke, moving closer to her son and stroking his cheek. "I love you, son," she said. There was greed in her eyes, as if she wanted more of her son's love in return. "Okay, Mom, I love you too," Max replied, looking at his mother. The woman was her name. Nancy was slender and beautiful, and she was the envy of young girls. And no wonder, for she took great care to look after herself. Her white skin color gave her even more coldness. Blue eyes, like two shards of ice, piercing her gaze through. And only a slight smile on her face spoke of her good spirits. Nancy liked to wear her hair up high and always wore high heels. She often changed her closet daily, buying more and more outfits for herself. Nancy looked at her son's clothes. Her face wrinkled a little. Then she pulled out the cash from her purse and handed it to her son. "Take something for yourself. You can't go around in the same clothes for long. It can lead to depression," she said, and then left his room. The spaniel followed her, claws clattering on the parquet floor. Max looked at his shirt. It was covered in wool. The boy took it off and threw it in the basket. Looking at the box he had brought from the neck up, he took the lid off. Inside was a blue shirt, and on top of it a small candy bar with wishes for a sweet life. An involuntary smile touched his lips. "I think she likes me," thought the boy. Worn fully, he headed for the shower. The day came when the Max family hosted guests. The cooks had prepared an amazing meal. Champignons in cream sauce molded from the lower meat, many different salads, and much more. Everyone was already gathered around the table, only Max was late. Instead of going to the store, as his mother suggested, he went to Julia, who this time was not at home. He even decided that Alexa's grandfather was deliberately informing him of her absence. "There's our son," exclaimed Nancy, as soon as he appeared in the living room. There were bright lights burning all around, candles lit. A couple of gorgeous bouquets of roses adorned the room. Nancy walked over to her son, put her arms around him, and whispered in his ear, "Here is the deputy's daughter. She has to like you. Understand?" she whispered, barely moving her lips. Max answered her with a smile, then smiled and said hello to the others. Taking the seat across from the deputy's daughter, Max began to put food on his plate. There was silence. Noticing the slanted glances, Max smiled broadly again and then complimented the girl. "Cindy, are you so charming? I'm glad I had the opportunity to dine with your family," Max said. The girl's name was Cindy. She looked a little old. Or maybe she was just tired of acting like a girl from an important and wealthy family. Her overly elongated face, long nose, thin lips made her expression slightly repulsive. She gave the impression of a crybaby. When she smiled, her thin lips, threads of sparkle, appeared in a strange line resembling a horizontal comma. Her small, short teeth seemed to betray her shrewdness not only in food, but in everything else. "Thank you," replied the girl with a pronounced net. Max almost laughed. He could barely contain himself, stuffing a piece of sealed duck into his mouth. Dinner had begun. The guests piled treats onto their plates. Conversation ensued. Max watched the guests occasionally when his gaze would come across Cindy's eyes. The girl immediately began to flirt. During another of her smiles, Max managed to see a cucumber, tire root sticking out of her cheek. It looked quite funny. "Yes, our daughter is like a diamond to us," her father used to say. "She is infinitely talented and very intelligent. She often amazes me with her imagination." The father praised his daughter. "Yes, you can tell," Max said, which caused a new wave of stares. "I wanted to say that the beauty of a man is expressed in his imagination and mind, and he was slow in beauty." He finished, trying to keep his mask of touching and frankness. "That's so sweet," Nancy said, stepping on her son's toe with her heel. Max, eyes bulging with pain, slowly turned to face his mother and then displayed a grin of white teeth. "Our daughter graduated from the High School of Mathematics. She also plays the piano beautifully," Cindy's mother told her. "Asia, play us something." She turned to her. "I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to," she said. And there was that funny sound again. The girl sat down at the piano. Her thin and sparse hair barely covered her shoulders. Her thin fingers went down on the keys. The girl looked at the guests once more, and then winded her hands on the keys. A dog waltz began to play. The two families listened patiently to the performance. Smiles were pasted on their faces, and only the spaniel, Herman, unable to bear the falsity, began to forget at the top of his voice. 2 minutes later, applause broke out. Joyful Cindy returned to the table. "What do you say?" His mother asked Max a question. "You know," Max replied, nodding his head. "I like the fun one," he said, and met his mother's cold gaze. "I mean, it's cheerful." The boy got out of it. When dinner was over, Max could breathe out and be himself. Nancy and her husband William saw the guests off outside. Max picked up a grape and tossed it toward the ceiling. Caught it with his mouth. Herman, even though he didn't eat grapes, he still envied the guy. The next day, Max went to Julia's again under the pretext of sewing another shirt. Julia talked to Max in a businesslike manner. Together, they discussed the color, the style, and also the buttons. When all the details were discussed, Julia said, "Well, I have to work. As long as I have orders, I have to keep up," she said, waiting for Max to leave the house. The guy stood at the entrance and nodded. He hesitated. He wanted to tell her something, to offer her something, to meet. But his lips were frozen. Max called out to Julia, seeing that he was out of focus. "I have to work until next week's meeting," the girl repeated. Yeah, I got it. Could you just give me one more second?" Finally, the guy blurted out. Julia listened attentively. "Thank you for the candy bar." "It was my pleasure," he said. "Yes, it was my pleasure," Julia replied, waiting for the customer to leave the house. "Have you decided to make up for the incident in the cafe?" asked Max. That the girl laughed. "No, I give all my customers a chocolate bar. It's my trick, like a sweet compliment," Julia explained, making Max feel uncomfortable. Once again, she was the smart one. "How about we get together?" Unexpectedly for a girl? He asked. Julia looked at the guy confused. "I'll take you for a walk into a cafe," Max explained. By this time, Julia had already realized that she liked the guy. However, at this point, she genuinely didn't know if she should accept. "We'll just go for a walk. We'll talk and eat. And then I'll bring you home," he continued to persuade. Well then, maybe Monday is my free day," the girl replied. Having agreed on this, the couple said goodbye. After the meeting on Monday, Max and Julia met on Wednesday, and then again on Monday. During the walks down, people talked a lot on different topics, sometimes argued and fooled around. Once Max invited the girl to drive his cool and beautiful car. Julia agreed out of interest. She had never ridden in such a car before. Max drove out on a free highway. The road was smooth and wide. The visibility was great. "Do you want to learn how to drive?" he asked, raising his sunglasses to his forehead. "No, I'll have a driver," cheerfully replied the girl, removing strands of hair. "Well, at least for a change," Max insisted. He wanted to surprise Julia and teach her something new. "Come on, I don't mind," agreed Julia. The car stopped on the side of the road. Max took off his glasses and looked at Julia carefully. Her copper eyes and blonde hair made her particularly attractive. Max lowered his gaze to her plump lips, but there was no easy way to get close to this girl. She loves and really values herself. Julia moved into the driver's seat. Max took her seat. "So watch," Max began. "You press the brake and clutch at the same time." Julia did as he said, now turning the key release, the brake, and slowly hit the gas. Julia was focused. The car moved. "Get out on the road and drive safely. Just don't go over 80, he warned her. Julia obediently followed his instructions. The asphalt quickly went under the wheels. The girl felt the pleasure of the process. "You're looking good," Max remarked, surprised at the speed with which she was getting up to speed. The wind ruffled her hair. The car glided smoothly down the road. The kilometers were behind them. Keys turned. To the left of the steering wheel, Max commanded. "And don't forget to turn on," he added. Max kept his eyes on the road and glanced at the girl behind the wheel. She was very beautiful. The green belted shirt looked stunning on her. Max caught himself thinking he was hooked. Julia had indeed gotten used to the simple rules quite quickly. On a free highway it was easy. But now the car behind them began to overtake their car. It passed very close. Max heard a grinding sound in the passenger seat window. A familiar face of the girl he used to spend time with peeked out, but then disappeared without a trace. She held her hand up. There was something metal clenched in her fist. Max realized that she had stolen his car. The hooligan's car sped forward. Max felt a rush of blood to his temple. He went into a frenzy. He tried to calm himself down, but instead he shouted equalizer at him. What Julia, who was already driving at 100 kilometers per hour, did not understand. Catching up with them, Max repeated, unable to find a place to sit in his chair. Julia pressed the gas pedal and the car started to pick up speed. Then Julia decided to get closer to them and turned the steering wheel to the right. Max saw his car driving straight at the offenders. He was scared. "Stop," he screamed. "What are you doing?" Julia, not realizing what was being asked of her, she took her foot off the pedal. The pursuing car began to slow down. "What's going on?" Julia asked him again. "I didn't have much time left. I wanted to get closer to them," she explained. Max rubbed his forehead. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Aggressive driving is not encouraged," he said. "I'm sorry for what I did." "Who are these friends of yours?" Julia asked, parking on the side of the road. "Yeah, you could say that. I'm sorry I confused you," said Max. Then he got out of the car. In front of him were 3 long stripes, shimmering in the sun. Max raised his head with his hands and then got back behind the wheel. "I would not like to participate in such a showdown," said the girl. "It's not good for me." Julia was right. And Max realized it, but it was too late. On the way back, Julia drove again. This time, the straight road was replaced by tight loops that never seemed to end. "Pull over," Max said, but Julia kept going at a steady speed of no more than 40. "Brake," Max said, for some reason whispering, "Brake." Whispered again. It was as if he was afraid to upset the balance. Julia said, also in a whisper. The girl smoothly and confidently entered the corner. Then another one, and not Shika, and on me. Max said a little indignantly, "I'm not a chick." Already through laughter, said Julia. It was incredibly funny to her. The fact that Max had been whispering to her to slow down during the whole long right turn. This moment was quite strange, dangerous, and funny at the same time. The evening came to an end. Max drove Julia to the house. He contemplated her facial features, her bare shoulders. He wanted to touch them. He hoped for a kiss, but the girl, thanking him for such an incredible adventure, said goodbye and got out of the car, leaving Max alone with his waiting. Tough nut. Why so? Puzzled the guy. The guy saw Julia as a very strong person, even though she was 5 years younger than him. Max was surprised, amazed, delighted, and at the same time aroused a great desire to really show himself in this life. The girl showed Max this world in a different way. He was very much surprised when he learned that you can be happy about simple things, such as a good night's sleep or a successful jam, fresh tea or friendly communication with the customer, or the completion of work before the deadline. Max was unfamiliar with this. After all, he never had to hurry or manage anything. The cook would always make him tea at any time. A true, sincere friendship. He never thought about that. And in order to finish things on time, but Max did not have his own personal affairs for which he could be responsible. The lad knew that the time would come and he would quietly and safely take his mother's place. Julia had become an amazing person to him. With every meeting they had, he admired her more and more. He was literally enchanted by her. So sweet, gentle, and cheerful, and so determined, responsible, and most importantly, seeing the goal ahead. It made Max think about his future life more than anything else. Yes, becoming a bank manager is an amazing job, always financially secure. But Max wanted to learn how to overcome obstacles on his own and make his own path. At home, Max thought about how he could do something nice for Julia. He wanted to impress her, to accomplish some feat. All those banal rooftop dates or car rides were not feats. They were entertainment. But the real Max was racking his brains. A spaniel entered the room. Herman brought in his mouth a fashion magazine that his mother often flipped through. "Since when are you interested in fashion?" Max jokingly asked the spaniel. In response, he received the magazine, and absolutely at length and palm. "And Herman?" howled the boy. He immediately pulled out a damp napkin and wiped his hand. Then his gaze fell on the fashion magazine. The guy seriously thought about it. For about 20 minutes, he sat still and looked at the cover of the magazine, which showed a happy girl in a beautiful and stylish lilac dress. The next seconds, a terrific idea hit the guy, which made his heart beat more frequently. It was now more than ever that he was sure that this was what would work, emboldened by this thought that had now grown into a real goal. Max walked out into the hall with a smile on his face. There he met his mother with Cindy. It turned out that the girl had come to visit him and give him a book that had become one of her favorites. Max displayed a grin, as his mother had taught him in cases when you don't like a person very much, but you have to be polite. "Hi," Cindy said hello. He returned the favor. "Thanks for the book. I'll be sure to read it a little later." The smile never left his lips. "I have something very important to do right now. I have to run away," Max said, and kissed his mother on the cheek. He hurried away. "He is so cute and sweet," Cindy said, definitely feeling like the one Max was dreaming of. Nancy, realizing that Cindy was not interested in her son, smiled back at her. Meanwhile, Max came to the cafe. Before coming here, he had already managed to call several girls he knew. Everyone was gathered around a round table. The girls were eagerly waiting for Max to state the reason why they had gathered. "Girls, I'm so grateful that you agreed to come here. What I need from you now is real help, your smiles, and all your talent for posing. What do you think? Fun?" asked Max, confident that they would definitely say yes. "Last month you promised to call me back, and you never did." One of them was indignant. "And I waited for you for 3 hours, and now I have to help you at your beck and call." The girl grimaced, a disgruntled look on her face. Max furrowed his brow. He hadn't realized so many girls resented him. All his attempts to get girls to star in a fashion magazine had failed. "Okay, I admit it. I'm a jerk. You can hate me." "I deserved it," said Max. The girls left him, leaving him all alone. "It's not that simple," the guy muttered to himself. However, remembering Cindy, Max jumped out of the table and rushed home. He met her on the doorstep. She was just leaving. "Cindy, what meeting?" Trying to hold his breath, Max said. "I have a tempting proposition for you," he said. Cindy looked at Nancy in surprise. There was hope in her eyes. "Can I talk to you tete-a-tete?" he asked, smiling slyly. "Of course you can," she agreed happily, her eyes bulging. She was discouraged by such a sudden change in her son's behavior. "Anyway, I have a proposition for you," Max began, telling her his idea. "So you will be on the cover of a magazine in the most fashionable dress," he finished. "I, of course, expected a little different from you, but I'd be happy to help you," she said. Max heard so much sincerity and purity in her words that he almost felt guilty about using the girl for his own purposes. When Max managed to arrange the models for the magazine, he went to Julia's house. The girl opened the door. "Oh, Max, hello. I'm sorry I can't be with you right now. I need to finish my pants," she replied. Max's eyes rounded, making them so pitiful that Julia melted. "All right, just no more than half an hour." "Okay," she said. Max nodded quickly as the guy shared an idea with the girl. Julia seriously thought about it. "It's cool, it's great. I love it. But where are we going to get the funds?" She asked a reasonable question. She wasn't used to anyone giving her such large sums of money. "I'll be responsible for all expenses." Max blurted out. "I agree." Julia answered immediately. She didn't expect such a quick answer from herself. However, it didn't scare her that Max might suddenly demand the money back. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she firmly knew that this had to end in success. And even if it didn't, the desire to start acting on it was very motivating. It would be a very interesting experience. From that day on, Julia began to actively prepare for the event. She had a lot of guests at her house. While one girl was trying on the dress and Julia was adjusting the material, the other 5 were sitting in the kitchen together with grandfather Alex drinking tea with raspberries and gingerbread, and the old man was telling the girls different stories from his life. There was such a man in our village, Grandpa Alex said. He had a lot of strength. What were his high shoulders like? Grandfather spread his hands with spread fingers. Here he goes with his horse to the forest to collect firewood. Then one of the girls interrupted him with her bare hands. She was perplexed. Aha, continued the grandfather. And so he loads the cart to the top and comes back with firewood. And it was necessary to go uphill. The girls listened with their mouths open. And so the horse goes up the mountain, carrying the cart. I'm almost at the top, but I can't get it up. What should I do? He asked a rhetorical question. So the man takes the cart instead of the horse and pulls it himself. The girls gasped. Aha. The grandfather Alex continued. He strains and pulls it himself and lifts the cart up the mountain. How strong was that? Finished the old man. And what kind of man? Just a gift, said one of them. The others clapped their eyes. That's how the days of future models for the magazine passed. Taking off some clothes. Conversations with Alex's grandfather and tea. Julia labored like a bee, drew up blueprints and made patterns, adjusted dresses to the figure, selected material, downloaded details. Cindy watched over the discipline of the girls. Max all this time was looking for a suitable room for shooting, made arrangements with photographers and lighting. After a month of hard work, everything was ready for the show. Julia was very excited. Max was also worried, but what worried him the most was that he had managed to organize such an event himself, to gather people, to find a room, to think about advertising, and this is already a great success. Do you look irresistible? Max said, turning to Julia. She applied her makeup with a deft movement. She drew one arrow, then another. Thank you. That's nice to hear, Julia replied, smiling at his reflection in the mirror. The music began to play rhythmically, the spotlights shining brightly on both sides of the spacious rectangular room. Sat the invited guys and girls, men and women. The host, who was Max's friend, announced the start of the evening, and the first pair of girls came out in summer jumpsuits, stylish, bright, beautiful. They strutted down the red carpet, swaying their hips with confidence. The efforts of Christina's friend Julia did not go in vain. They were followed by 2 more couples in overalls, shorts, and other colors. The audience in the hall sat in silence. At first, they couldn't figure out how to react. The second wave pleased the audience with summer dresses with long skirts. The girls looked very elegant and feminine in these outfits. There was applause. Julia, who stood backstage in excitement, watched the reaction. And the assembled audience. Then the presenter paused and played a little game with the audience. During this time, the models had time to change their clothes and makeup. The music started again. It was already more assertive. On the red carpet appeared charming girls in women's shirts. Free cut was hidden on and belt and in the legend. This form of attire perfectly emphasized the waist and from any type of figure created everyone's favorite shape. Hourglass men avidly saw off the models, who confidently walked on the stage, looking straight ahead. Everything about them was perfect. Clothes, shoes, facial expressions, hairstyles. They attracted playful smiles, men, envious glances of women. Julia, who had remained in the shadows all this time, trembled with pleasure and covered in goosebumps from the swell of their feelings. For a job well done, aren't you cold? Asked her Max, who stealthily crept up behind her and put a hand on her shoulder. Julia flinched. The fright on her face was replaced by a smile. No, something was so tense. How can one freeze? The girl replied, continuing to watch the scene. The guests were happy, their faces shining. Cries of delight could be heard. Max took Julia's hand and placed it in his palm. He brought his and her fingertips together and felt some roughness on the surface of the skin. "It is better not to touch my hand yet," Julia muttered, removing her hand. She turned her palm upward. The pads of her fingers showed barely visible white spots, labor calluses. The girl laughed. Turning, picking, holding the cloth. She pictured it with gestures. Yesterday, to make time, sat up until midnight. She spoke with a slight smile. Max noticed again her persistence and stamina. He should learn a lot from this girl. "Are you incredible?" Max said. "I'm in awe of you," he admitted. Julia blossomed. "Thank you for organizing everything. It's a lot of work, and it's incredible," she repeated, raising her eyebrows high. The two laughed. Max moved closer to Julia. His gaze lowered to her nun-like lips. An unknown force drew them together. There were only a few centimeters between them. "Julia, get ready," reported Martin, who was the host. Having said that, he went to the dressing room to the girls. "How quickly the time flew by," said Julia, and disappeared into the closet. Max remained standing backstage. In front of his eyes stood the girl's face, which a second ago was so close. "Ladies and gentlemen, our event has come to an end," said the host. "And now I present to your attention the person who, in fact, created all these beautiful outfits with her delicate hands." Julia loudly said his name. Julia felt the heat in her head and ears. She was unprepared for so much attention to her person. "Come on, Julia, come on," Martin whispered, pushing the girl onto the stage. Julia walked down the red carpet. The bright lights were blinding. The photographer's flashes were confusing the landmarks. She hadn't realized walking back and forth would be so difficult. She saw the faces of people watching her intently, following her every step. Someone was pointing at her and saying something to his neighbor. The girl felt a slight dizziness. She wasn't used to so many eyes. When she returned backstage, her heart was pounding frantically and her mouth was dry. Max jumped up. He held her by the arms. "It's all right. You always can," he pronounced. You could hear the worry in his voice. Julia couldn't get a word out at that moment. She breathed and tried to calm down. And then Max felt for the first time that she needed him now more than ever. He convinced Julia to hold her against him. Everything was fine. Everything was cool. "You looked great," he whispered, swaying sideways with her. The showroom event was a great success. It shook up the city. Julia's name was on the lips of the townspeople. After such a big project, Julia closed herself in her home and did not want to go out. She felt like everyone was pointing fingers at her now. She realized that she was in no way ready for the scrutiny, attention, and to be noticed. Julia was lying on the couch in her room, with a blanket and a mug of chai and milk. After it was over, she wanted to shut herself in a hole so no one could see her. "Julia, hello my dear," whispered Christina. She entered so quietly that Julia didn't immediately notice her. Christina stretched out, getting out from under the blanket and hugging her friend. "I'll get you some tea," she said. Julia came back to the room with a tray of tea and sweets. "This is all so unfamiliar," Julia said, taking a piece of chocolate. "Do you need to get used to it?" answered Christina. "Or if you think it's a big deal." What a big event it was. Then imagine someone else doing even bigger and much, much more often. "So you're just one performer in a huge theater." The friend smiled. "Well, as for me, I'm thrilled. I enjoyed everything so much that I want to participate in it some more." Christina looked up and smiled broadly, imagining the next show. "And that handsome guy, named Max, by the way, are you two together?" Christina's eyes gleamed with cunning. Then she took a small cube of brownie, cut it into pieces, and sent it into her mouth. Julia was slow to answer. "I don't know, just socializing for now," she replied thoughtfully. She had always been cautious in her relationships with people, and especially with guys. She had never felt a great need to have a boyfriend. She had always had other interests in her life that she also enjoyed. After a day, Julia was back into her usual rhythm. It seemed as if the clothing show had been a whole month instead of 3 days ago. So much was it knocked out of the usual rhythm of life. The girl busied herself with sewing. Today, they brought her material for curtains. Julia pressed the pedal, and the machine sewed a straight stitch. And it calmed her down. Max had called once. But Julia did not worry because she did not think about him. There was a knock at the door. "I will open the door," Julia said and went to the door. Max stood on the threshold. He looked a little mysterious. "What's the intrigue?" asked Julia. Smiling, she was happy to see Max. The guy realized that he was seriously interested in her and decided to take advantage of it. "Uncovering the intrigue is worth 2 kisses," he mumbled, hiding his hands behind his back. Julia stood silent, not knowing what to say. "Okay, just one little kiss," Max spoke. Julia leaned her palm to her lips and sent the guy an air kiss. Max marveled, "You're a sly one." He objected. "That's not fair. You didn't specify what kind of kiss." Julia laughed. Max handed her the magazine on the cover. She recognized one of the girls from the fashion show. And at the top was a large inscription: "The sun shone on our city." The girl flipped through all the pages. The pictures were amazing. It was like she didn't make those clothes at all. It was unbelievable. "It's incredible," Julia exclaimed. Then she pounced on Max and threw him right into her lips. She jumped and cheered like a child who had gotten an unexpected surprise. "You're a genius, you're a wizard. How did you do that, class?" The girl couldn't believe her eyes. "I just made a deal with the right people," pronounced Max, satisfied that he managed to do something worthy for the girl with whom he clearly fell in love. "Do you have a talent?" Julia turned to him. "You have to know how to negotiate with people," she remarked, looking into Max's eyes. At that moment, he felt himself growing stronger in his own eyes and in the eyes of the person who was important to him. "Julia, be my girlfriend," Max said unexpectedly. "Your girlfriend," repeated Julia. "What does that mean, your girlfriend?" "I'm not a thing." She asked a question. Had she confused him again? No, of course not. Max was confused. "I meant that I'd like to ask you to go out with me. I would like to take care of you and help you." Max didn't have time to finish. Julia put her palm to his lips. "You can't know that." She spoke in advance and touched her warm lips to his. Max was over the moon. Max and Julia continued to socialize as they had free days before. They talked a lot, discussed different topics, went for car rides, swam at the river until September. Max, after a successful attempt to publish his first magazine, decided to continue this endeavor. At the same time, he created a YouTube channel where he published interviews with different interesting people of the city. It was Julia who helped him to discover in himself a unique ability to build relationships with people. And Max loved it. He felt it was his strength. He felt he could build on it to take the next steps. "Mom, are we going to have company tonight?" Max announced. "And who is it?" Nancy inquired, trying on earrings to match her dress. She got home early from work today and was going to get a massage. "You look very pretty." Max complimented her. "Thank you, my dear," the mother replied. She stroked her son's cheek. "6 will be home." Max said goodbye to his mother. The cook had prepared marvelous food and drinks. Dessert was eagerly awaited. Nancy and William sat at the round table, waiting for their son's arrival. Husband and wife were a little bored. William was spoiling the soloist by trying to put it on a fork. Will's wife stopped him. The husband obediently put the fork down. But lo and behold, the tall doors swung open, and Max and Julia entered the living room. Max's father, William, was pleasantly surprised to see such a pretty creature beside his son. Nancy, on the other hand, raised her chin high and managed to cast a few glances at the girl from top to bottom. Max's mother was immediately struck by the girl's fullness. Julia was in a closed dress with a belt, but it still gave away her slight excess weight. "Mom, Dad, meet Julia, my girlfriend," Max said excitedly. Nancy rounded her eyes and almost opened her mouth, but hid it behind a wide smile. Julia said hello in the same way. "Ah, how lovely," lied her mother, discreetly looking at the full thighs, her son's chosen one. "Our son is such a joker," said Nancy. Julia, without giving any meaning to her phrase, walked with Max to the table. The boy helped her to sit down. William caught his son's gaze. He was genuinely pleased with his choice. "Julia, you probably can't have fat. You're on a diet," the mother said wryly, sending a piece of salted fish into her mouth. "I have to tell you," Julia replied, "that I don't follow any diets, and moreover, I consider my figure to be unique," Julia replied, which she was happy with. Nancy did not forget to stretch her lips in a smile. "Well, son, will you tell me how you met the charming Julia?" asked the father. Nancy glanced at him, hiding her indignation. Max remembered their first meeting. Julia looked at him with a request in her eyes not to tell him about the cafe. "Can I say that our paths have coincidentally crossed?" Max began. "I came to pick up an order already placed and to sew myself a shirt," he replied. "And who bothered to tell you that I could do the same?" "More polite?" asked Nancy and looked at the girl with some contempt. "Your sister, Mom, Aunt Wendy?" Max answered. Nancy choked. To hide her embarrassment, she took a glass of juice. By the way, Julia had her first fashion show this summer, with clothes sewn by herself from her own patterns. Max reported. "Really? Really?" exclaimed the father. "Congratulations. So you've been doing this for a long time. Maybe you graduated from a school?" Father asked. "Oh no, I am self-taught," Julia answered with ease. "A couple of years ago, a neighbor gave me an old machine in the closet. Found materials from a long time ago, and everything came together," said the girl, taking a bite of an orange caviar sandwich and sticking firmly above her upper lip. At this point, Nancy looked at Julia. Nancy, who herself was very much into new outfits and did not miss fashion trends, could not get it into her head how a simple girl managed to organize this project. "Julia, did you have money or savings to finance the event?" she asked, looking directly into the girl's eyes. "Was it your son's idea?" Julia replied. "He took care of all the expenses," she replied. Nancy was discouraged. Her son had taken money from the family budget. For some obscure girl. Ah, even so. Nancy stretched out, looking at William. Max pressed the right corner of his lip. He had forgotten to warn Julia not to talk about it. His mother was very jealous of money. She counted her expenses daily, while always forgiving herself for big spends on clothes and furnishings. "Well, son, I'm glad you put your money in the right direction for once." William laughed. "Thanks, Dad." Max shook his head. He knew he had a habit of wasting his father's money on nonsense. "Julia has her own magazine," Max said. "But I'm not involved in that business at all," the guest objected. "The process of creating the magazine is completely organized by you," Julia said. "What?" the father asked, not believing his ears. "My son creates something himself. It's a joke." He laughed again. Nancy kept the mask of kindness, of desirability. In reality, she was being gnawed on from the inside by greed, by jealousy. She had time to notice that this girl really meant something to him. It was as if she was starting to feel herself slowly but surely being sidelined right now. Dinner came to an end. Julia thanked Max's family for their hospitality and a great dinner. "Yes, thank you, Julia. But I would still recommend that you eat smaller portions." "Yes," Nancy said. "I will certainly think about your suggestion," Julia replied. She felt an incipient desire to answer Max's mother so that she would not have any more thoughts about it. Max drove Julia home. "In front of your family, I look like a wire from the village." The girl laughed. "My mom, she's always jealous of me," Max said. "I think you get along with her," he said. After which they said goodbye. "Son dear," his mother turned to him when he got home. "You don't mean to say that you are really going to tie your life to this one, do you?" She was matching words with this girl. Nancy overpowered herself not to say the nasty thing. "That's exactly what I wanted to tell you and your father. And I think I've made that clear," Max replied. "You're upsetting me," the mother said in a voice ready to let a tear fall. "Mom, she's a good girl, determined," said Max, determined. The mother boiled over into a shouting match. "She comes from a poor family. What kind of determination is that supposed to mean? Such people have a bad reputation." She said in a steely voice, "She would tarnish our family." "Think what father will say," she asked in anger. "I spoke to my father. He liked it," Max said. He told you so because he knows your nature, which very quickly loses interest in everything around you. He thinks you're not playing and will calm down. But I can see that, the mother said, raising her fingers in a single point. You must stop all communication with her, Nancy said, changing to a calm tone. We can't have this kind of thing in the newspapers. We are responsible for our reputation and position in society. Go, she said when she had finished speaking. Max left his mother's room. Following him, the spaniel took over. He sensed that his mate was upset about something. Max didn't argue with his mother. He knew it was useless. This beautiful, rich woman, who is endowed with a certain power, is actually full of fears that torment her. But Max didn't know how he could change her point of view. As winter began, things slowed down and calmed down a bit. And when it fully came into its own, it forced the residents to wait out the hard frosts by the fireplace and with a warm blanket. Well, while they were basking under the soft stoves, Julia embodied new ideas of warm winter skirts, bright and interesting colors. She was happy when the customer was happy. Simultaneously, every 2 months under Max's guidance, a magazine with new models of both women's and men's clothing was published. To be in this subject, Max took considerable pleasure. But with the arrival of spring, life revitalized anew. The sun shone more. The earth walked more strongly. The energy of love and the desire to live began to move in people. For almost a year now, Max and Julia have stayed close to each other. Unable to wait any longer, Max takes decisive steps. Max, hello, come in, said Alexa's grandfather, opening the door for him. How do you say hello? Asked Max, shaking his hand. Thank you to say hello in front of us, replied Grandpa Alex. All three of them gathered around the table. Julia had prepared a delicious dinner. Despite her shyness and means, Julia always cooked deliciously. When everyone was about to start eating, Max suddenly got up from the table. I have a little digression from lunch, he said, leaving the table. Julia watched with interest to see what would happen next. Max got down on one knee and suddenly held out a wedding ring with the words, Julia, I offer you to be my wife, he said. He was so real in that moment. Julia glanced at her grandfather. He sat silent, with his spoon in his hand. This is all so unexpected, she said. Are you sure about this? Julia asked. I know you're changing my life around you. I want to make myself better, he said quietly. I'm ready to learn to take responsibility for my future family, Max said. His words gave Julia an inner thrill. I wanted to listen to them and listen to them. I agree, the girl replied. A gold ring was put on her ring finger. Forced Julia to cover the samurai. It looked marvelous. The wedding was scheduled in a month. Max, coming home, told his mother and father this happy news. He didn't care what they thought. He knew that this girl loved him and that he was ready to do many things for her sake that had never happened to him before. From what she heard, Nancy was silent for a moment and then still found something to say. Max, keeping herself in control, began to speak his mother. Please tell me it's not true? Are you just trying to mess with your beloved mother? She said. William came up behind her and put his arm around her shoulders. She paid no attention. Nancy put her hand on the bridge of her nose. Darling, say something. She turned to her husband. William shrugged. I trust my son's choice. What can I say? I can't make his heart fall out of love with this girl, he muttered. Did she blind you? Nancy exclaimed, walking over to the open window. You'll realize that all she wants from you is money. She has already forced you to pay for her wants in the form of ridiculous outfits and ridiculous fashion shows, she said. Her face turned red. The bad blood played out in the body of a mother who thought that since she gave life to a child, she decides who the child should be with. Don't say that, Max replied. I took the responsibility myself, he said firmly. You took the responsibility, Nancy grinned at him. Honey, stop it. You're making it worse. William tried to talk some sense into her. You're not getting married, are you? Nancy said in a cold tone. 2 blue shards of ice pierced through her son, after which Nancy walked out of the living room. The son tried to console his father. Don't worry, she'll get over it. That's women. he said, and went to follow his wife. From that day onwards, Nancy's life changed abruptly. Peace left her head and heart. From now on, she lived with the desire to separate the couple and bring her own son back to her. Nancy could not allow the one she had raised, the one she had invested in, all of a mother's love taken for herself, some shepherdess country girl collective farmer. The woman paced from side to side, occasionally looking out the window. She was waiting for Max Nancy to arrive. The maid's voice came out. To make you soothing tea was offered by a woman in her early 50s. Ah, Molly, the mother said wistfully. I'm not at peace with myself. How can I talk some sense into my son? She asked as she plumped down on the sofa. Her long summer dress spread softly on the seat. I'm afraid I can't help you here. Is your husband right? She added. Bring me some hot tea, said Nancy in a voice filled with tenderness. She had always liked Molly. She was the only woman in her neighborhood from a poor family to whom she could confide all her secrets. As strange as that might sound. Sometimes in talking to her, she felt like a little girl surrounded by her mother's love. Nancy herself, along with her sister Rosa, had grown up in a God-forsaken village. Having come to the city to study, they were desperate to escape poverty. They worked hard, giving all their time to their studies and work. Finally, their labors were rewarded. Nancy and Wendy graduated from a top banking school. However, Wendy soon married well and Nancy took a job at the bank. She started at the bottom of the ladder, but thanks to her skills and her acquaintance with William, who at that time was already a young and promising lawyer, she quickly worked her way up to the head of the bank. Having become a successful and wealthy woman, which is very rare for someone like her, Nancy could not free herself from the fear that it could all end in an instant. She had long ago had a big, beautiful house, a car with a private driver, servants, expensive things, delicious food, a favorite son, and a loving husband. But the feeling that she did not deserve it did not leave her. And now Julia, who appeared so unexpectedly, became a direct threat to her personal happiness. After all, this girl was a reminder of her past life, which she tried to forget, from which she wanted to get out of. Nancy, the maid's back. Here's your tea, freshly made. She spoke affectionately, and Natalia's heart grew warm. Max came home for a moment to tell you that he had some business to attend to. He had to go, Molly said. I understand, you can go, the woman said in a low voice. Nancy sat with her fingers crossed. She folded them and then folded them again and spread them again. Nancy pondered further plans. The wedding must not take place. The wedding was a week away. Nancy put on her best pantsuit with an elegant cutout on the back, a wide-brimmed hat and glasses, completed her expressive look. Giving the driver the address, she set off to meet her. Welcome to our private establishment, the pleasant girl at the entrance to the restaurant for VIP guests said. Nancy smiled at the corner of her lips and went to the table she had reserved. There was someone waiting for her. It was a man of about 47 years of age. He looked very young. The lilac shirt gave him a fresh look. Nancy took off her glasses and hat. Hello, dear. The man spoke and kissed her hand. I am very glad to see you. You are still beautiful and young. He complimented her. Anthony, I am very glad that you agreed to meet, Nancy said. She looked at his smooth, shaven face, at the swarthy skin, and blue eyes shining with fire. I really need your help. The case is not too serious. It's personal, she said. My love, anything for you. He said, raised a glass of wine to his lips. We need to kidnap one person for a while. It's a girl, said Nancy. Wow, the man marveled. How dare she cross my queen? Anthony went on with his beautiful words. He was an old friend of Nancy's. They had once been very close in their distant youth, but Nancy had opted for William, a successful and promising husband for the future. Not to me, but to my son, she replied. To charm him requires no end of money. Nancy lied. She didn't think Anthony should know the whole truth. We just need to get her out of here so she can't find her way back, she asked as she bought a small red drink. Yeah, easy. When do we need to pick her up? Asked Anthony. I'm sorry that woman ever left him. Nancy replied, fixing a lock of hair. I'll give you the address later so you can do it from the rank. She said, And then she added, "Let's make sure that everything is neat and quiet." "Whatever you say," replied Anthony. Nancy put on her glasses and hat and walked out of the establishment. Anthony reached over and picked up Nancy's glass, which had her lipstick imprints on it. He ran his thumb over the trail. He regretted not being able to be her husband. Nancy returned home, full of energy. She was in a good mood. A smile shone on her face. She was glad that she would be able to keep her family out of misfortune. Max said cheerfully when he returned home after his many errands. With Julia's arrival, his life had taken on a new meaning. It was as if new doors had opened. He began to see things he could not see before. "Son, my darling, come to me," Nancy said. "I want you to know that I love you," she said, wanting to make him feel sorry for her. "I love you too, Moms," Max replied. After kissing her on the cheek, "Did your father give you this?" she said, holding out the envelope to him. "What is it that you don't understand, Max?" "I don't know what he wanted to tell you," Nancy answered. "I take off the jewelry and put it on the table." Max went back to his room. Opening the letter, he read a few lines. "Dear son, I am very sorry for the decision I have made, but I cannot go against the will of my beloved woman. I have to inform you that if you do not stop your relationship with Julia, I will have to close your bank account and also disinherit you. And follow your heart." Max was shocked. He hadn't expected such a turn on his forehead. Sweat was beating up on him, for the wedding was a week away. The restaurant had been booked. The guests had been invited. Everything had been prepared and was waiting for payment in the next few days. Max crumpled the letter and, taking his jacket, quickly left the house. Nancy went to the window. Max opened the door of his car, raised his head as gaze met his mother's eyes. Nancy experienced a thrill of excitement. Never before had she been in such a confrontation with her son. Remembering the promised address, she picked up the phone and dialed her sister. "Hello, hi, listen, I wanted to make a dress for myself too. Could you give me the number of that atelier where you've been making mistakes lately? She's got that angelic voice." "Why not?" "Sure, I'll send it right over. You'll be thrilled. The girl is very nice, sews professionally," said Wendy. Nancy kindly nodded to her sister. When the address was received, she immediately forwarded it to Anthony. However, instead of the usual "okay," she received a message asking, "Will I see you soon?" Nancy furrowed her brow. "What?" she asked in a full voice. Why the hell was she outraged? At the sounds, Molly walked into the room. "What's wrong?" "Everything's fine," she asked worriedly. "It's just the phone's on the fritz." "And I need to make an emergency call," Nancy said wrongly. "What are you talking about?" "I'll pay you back." Nancy sent the next message and immediately received the reply. "I don't need the money." "You know that." "God, how awful." Nancy whispered and wrote to him. "When the deed is done, I'm yours." Her heart was pounding frantically. "Waiting for you tomorrow at the same place." Nancy stared at the messages with her mouth open. She was in a stupor. Then she automatically called Anthony. His phone was already off. "Shit," exclaimed Nancy, face in incomprehension. Meanwhile, Max went to the bank. The bank's app on his phone displayed the amount, but the guy couldn't withdraw it. Asking the female employee for help, he waited for a response. "Sorry, but unfortunately your account is blocked," the girl replied. Max thanked her and went to his car. However, what was his surprise when she was not there? Max dialed his father's number. The receiver said, "I'm in a meeting in another city. Leave a message." Dad really always put the answering machine on when he left on a business trip, not knowing what to do. Max caught a cab and drove to Julia's house. The door was opened by Grandpa Alex. "Max, hello, come in." As always, he was smothered and kind. "Are you excited about something?" asked Grandpa Alex. Immediately recognized the concern on Max's face. Julia appeared in the hallway. "What happened?" she asked, looking at the future groom, on whose face white spots appeared. "There were unforeseen circumstances." Max began to speak. "The thing is that my father blocked my bank account and took my car." He said, "What does that mean?" Julia didn't understand. "It means that we won't be able to pay for the party and the restaurant." We'll have to cancel everything and just sign for now. Max finished. I borrowed some money from a friend. It's enough for the first time, and then I'll get a job, he added. After the letter from his father, he decided not to return home. His grandfather kicked him out. Your parents cut you off pretty good. Then he sat down at the table. Julia suggested that Max also go into the kitchen. Yes, it's hard when you go against your parents' will, he said, and moved the mug of tea that Julia had just poured into a cup. The aroma of fresh, roasted tea was soothing, even embarrassing. Now you can look me in the eye, said Max. What's there to be ashamed of? You're already an independent guy. It's time to provide for yourself and your future wife. If you call me to the registry office, said Alexa's grandfather. I agree, replied Max, looking at the future bride. I'm more worried about how you will then communicate with your parents. It will be hard on the soul, said Julia. Bread and tea. God help you, replied the grandfather to his granddaughter and her fiancé. After the conversation, Max came to his friend Nikita. For some time they agreed that he would live with him. That's what they did. In the meantime, Nancy was wondering what to do. All her life she had been faithful to her husband. There had never been a single time that thoughts of infidelity had crept into her mind. But now, with her peaceful life and the happiness of her beloved son at stake, she was ready to go to great lengths. There was no time to delay further. At midnight, Nancy could not sleep. Bad thoughts visited her head. Finally, sleep seized her in its embrace. She dreamed that she was standing in a restaurant wearing a beautiful long blue dress. In her hand, she held a glass of red wine. Its Serbian flavor was pleasant. Then a swarthy man with blue eyes appeared. He approached Vanessa almost closely. It was Anthony. He took the glass from her hands and laced it to the bottom, then ran his wet tongue along her slender neck. Nancy felt unprecedented pleasure. She made no attempt to stop Anthony. On the contrary, she craved love. Gradually, she gave herself to him without abandon. When Anthony had completely possessed her, she heard a familiar voice. Nancy, the voice asked her, "What are you doing?" It was her husband. Nancy stopped, and Anthony kept on and on caressing her. The woman tried to pull away, but his hands held her with an iron grip. Then Nancy saw a multitude of curious eyes looking at her. Every minute it became harder and harder to breathe. And finally, Nancy cried out. I woke up in a cold sweat. The clock read 5 p.m. Nancy was taking a bath. A lush bubble covered her still young body. The woman stood up and covered herself with a towel. She then walked over to the closet, reviewing her outfits. Taking the first silver dress she could find, she placed it on the bed. Natural makeup, clear and straight arrows, bright red lipstick. Nancy had her hair styled into a perfect bob. Calling a cab, she left for the meeting place. The pleasant music was a joy to listen to. A polite hostess escorted the woman to the proper private room for VIP guests. Here, any topic could be discussed without eavesdropping. It's good to see you again. And my love, said Anthony, and as he always did. He kissed Vanessa's hand. Let's get out of here quickly. Please, said Nancy. She was a little nervous. You can't rush these things, Anthony said, loosening the tie on his light pink shirt. He always dressed tastefully, which had attracted Nancy in his day. You're making me take a lot of risks, Nancy said, trying to let him know her excitement. Do you too? Anthony replied and smiled, placing his large palm over her hand. How about a drink? He suggested, opening the menu. Nancy didn't know what to say. She had no intention of spending the evening with him. However, she had unknowingly entered into a dangerous game. The waiter brought glasses, wine, and a cheese and meat platter. You still make me feel things. Can you imagine, Anthony said, looking at Nancy's high cheekbones and sensual lips. Why didn't you ever marry that girl? Remember, she asked him, trying to change the subject to a more worldly one. I kept hoping that your icy heart would melt, and you would come back to me, he said as he downed his wine and put a slice of cheese in his mouth. See, I'm still living that hope, he said unashamedly, examining the delicate skin of her cleavage. Nancy felt uncomfortable. She wanted to cover herself with a blanket when the torture in the restaurant was over though. The couple headed for the exit. Anthony had taken care of the car in advance and where they would go. The man brought Nancy to his luxurious country home. It was made of wood and stone. Lamps burned everywhere, illuminating the green garden and the beautiful grounds in the street in front of the house. "Could you live here?" Anthony said, showing the beauty of his house with his hands. "Shall we go swimming?" he asked, looking at the pool. Nancy began to hope that perhaps Anthony had changed his mind about his proposal. The man unbuttoned his shirt and threw off his pants, then plunged into the water. For a moment, the thought of running crept into Nancy's head, but she remembered they had a deal. The woman took off her dress and slowly entered the water. "Good girl," pronounced Anthony under the words "closer." "Relax. Let's just enjoy ourselves." "When was the last time you were easy and direct?" Nancy did not see fit to answer. She floated on her back, all the while following Anthony's movements. "Dial it up," said Anthony. "I'll see you underwater." He dove in and very quickly began to approach Vanessa. The woman swam away from him. But Anthony caught up with her in 1 second and lifted her in his arms. Nancy gasped in surprise. "I like you like this," he said more and snuggled against her body, running his hand through her hair. He unraveled it and the white curls fell to her shoulders. "I remember you like this," Anthony said and beat a passionate kiss to her lips. Nancy realized she could not escape. The next early morning, Nancy returned home. She prayed that no one was home. Once inside, she walked quickly to the bathroom of her room. The locked door and the silence gave her a sense of calm. She turned on the warm shower. Diving into it, the slinky water slid over her body. She tried to get away from the memories that vivid images were popping up in her head. Anthony's house was really nice and tastefully done. As much as he himself, however, her lips still remembered his kiss from the body touch of his hands. She had to admit that she was satisfied. 2 days before Max and Julia's wedding, Alexa's grandfather headed into town on business. When he had done what he needed to do, he didn't go to his house, but went to the address where Max lived. The door was opened to him by the service. She let him into the house. In the living room were present, oddly enough, all the members of the family, including William himself, Nancy, and Max. None of them had expected the old man to come. Alex's grandfather thought that Max had come to negotiate with his parents, but he had already made a decision, putting a wad of money on the table. He pronounced, "Here is the amount that is needed for the wedding. Max pays what is needed and that's it." "Pure and bright love is a gift," said Alex's grandfather. William was shocked by his action. And Alex continued, "I see, and you probably do too, that our children love each other sincerely. So let's not take the sin of destroying their love," finished the old man, then turned around and headed for the door. "Grandfather Alex, wait," and shouted his Max. "Don't you know? Julia has been kidnapped," he blurted out. Grandpa Alex's face clouded over. He furrowed his brow, however. He immediately realized whose hands it was. He walked over to the table and looked at Nancy. She lowered her eyes, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. But the old man did not avert his own. What dark eyes! "Well, Nancy, do you feel good?" asked Alexa's grandfather. "A mother gives life to a child, and she is also able to take it away," said Grandpa Alex. "I don't know what you are talking about," replied the woman, turning sideways to him. "You hide your eyes." Shame on you, stretched out the grandfather. "Well, God is your judge," said he, turned around and left. All three of them remained in complete silence. Nancy continued to stare at the table. After the old man's words, she was afraid to meet her husband's eyes. "Mom, do you know something?" Max asked. William was looking at her too. She asked me, shifting her gaze from one to the other. "No more than you do." "I think that old man is crazy," she said. And then, citing the headache, she went to her room. "Dad, don't you think it's strange for a bride to disappear just before the wedding?" Max asked the question strange, not strange. "The man should be searched for," William said. Meanwhile, Nancy locked herself in the bathroom. With trembling fingers, she dialed Anthony's number. "Anthony, where is the girl?" she asked, expecting him to answer immediately. "In a safe place, like you asked. I need you to keep her for a week, a month. Or better a year I'll pay, she said with all her might, wishing it wouldn't be revealed. The greatest reward for me is you. And you know it, said the voice in the tube. Nancy pressed the corners of his lips together. You're not going to blackmail me, she asked cautiously. Why would I? I'll just always be waiting for you to come back. Unless, of course, it's important to you. Sorry I have to go to Julia, he said and hung up. Nancy looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection was gray and somber. Her eyes glistened with tears. Turning on the water, she tried to calm herself down. Nancy shuddered. There was a knock on the bathroom door from her husband. Honey, you're here. William waited for an answer, teddying himself up. The woman appeared in the room. Everything is all right, William inquired. How can I put it? I'm upset, she said. And why is that? Questioned William. Isn't this what you wanted? He added. Although William knew nothing about the girl's abduction, Nancy tensed. What do you mean? She asked. William moved closer to her and pulled her against him. Nancy couldn't look him straight in the eye. She felt as if William would find out immediately. She's pushing me away, William asked, seeing that his wife was avoiding his gaze. You haven't been yourself since this morning, he said. I'm just wondering if we did the right thing. But it's better this way. I'm sure, said Nancy, turning her head to the right. What's that? Asked William. Where's that spot with the little red dots? On your neck, said Nancy's husband. Nancy broke into a cold sweat. She covered it with her hand. You know, I went in for a massage, and there was this new guy. He gave me a bruise. Nancy tried to get out of it. The new guy, so William repeated. Nancy prayed to herself that her husband would believe her. Then William lifted her chin and looked her straight in the eye. Nancy could hardly stand the look in his eyes. She was afraid William would read everything in her eyes. A moment more and his lips pressed tightly against hers. I have to go away for a couple days. I can't stay, unfortunately, William said. Keep me in the loop. Her husband finished and, leaving his jacket, left the room. Nancy followed him through the window. At some point, William looked up and Nancy flinched. She didn't want him to see her watching him through the window as William's car pulled out of the driveway. Nancy exhaled with relief. She walked over to the bed and flopped onto her back. Inside herself, she felt a sense of uneasiness from within. Meanwhile, Alexa's grandfather came to the police station. He had reported his granddaughter missing. A young uniformed policeman lazily walked to his desk and invited the grandfather to sit in a chair. Tell me if it's missing today, he asked, picking up a ballpoint pen. He played it between his fingers. Yes, all of a sudden it disappeared. The thing is, she wasn't going anywhere. She and her fiancé are getting married in 2 days, Grandpa Alex said, keeping an eye on the policeman. But these are brides. Girls are all worried before the wedding, pronounced the young police officer. Wait, she'll be back. Maybe she went to a girlfriend or something. He said. So Grandpa's lazy. Why don't you go home? The policeman concluded. Afterwards, he held out a phone number and said that if the girl didn't return in 3 days, they would organize a search. 3 days and 3 days can do anything to a man, the old man muttered. But what else was there for him to do? Grandfather Alex stood up and left the office. On his return home, he met his friend Julia with Christina. The girl in dress was waiting for him at the gate. Where did our Julia go? She asked, fending off you and the flies. Christina couldn't get through to her since morning. Is our Julia missing? Answered the grandfather. How did she disappear? I don't understand you, Grandpa Alex. Christina said. What do you mean missing? They had a fight with Max, she asked. That's the thing, everything is fine between them. I went to the city today, then to Max's parents, and he was there too. Max told me that Julia was missing. Her cell phone was off. I stood around, then I went to the police, and I just got home. And Julia was still gone, Grandpa said. I opened the lock with the key. What do we do now? Christina sits down on the chair. She put her hand to her lips, looking from object to object, as if she wanted to find a clue among them. Wait, what to do? Maybe she really will come on her own, Alex said. Nancy. I was lying on the bed with my arms out to the sides. In a matter of days, she had turned her life upside down, remembering Anthony's tender kiss. She ran the pads of her fingers over her lips. There was a knock on the door of the room. The woman flinched. Max appeared in the doorway. "Ah, son, it's you," she said, bringing herself back to normal. "Mom, I wanted to ask you a question," Max said, taking a couple of steps toward her. "Go ahead. I'm listening," Nancy replied, moving over to the couch. Nancy turned to Max so that he wouldn't see the stain that was left by the encounter with Anthony. "Mom, tell me the truth. You didn't say anything like that to Julia. What would make her disappear?" asked Max, approaching her desk where she usually did her makeup. "No, son, no. Why would I do that with a look of incomprehension on my face?" answered Nancy. "Yes, I admit that your father was cruel to you, depriving you of your money. But it's all for your own good. You'll thank me later," she said. Max had his back to her. He was looking at the various cosmetic items on the table. Then his gaze fell on a piece of paper of exactly the same texture on which the letter from his father had been written. He gently pushed the sheet toward him, and another sheet was revealed, on which something was written in his mother's hand. At this time, Nancy was massaging her whiskey. She wanted her son to see her suffer. "I hear you, Mom, I'm sorry." Max walked over to her. "I love you," he pronounced, and then hurriedly removed himself from her room. Max went into his own and quickly unfolded the written sheet. On it, in Nancy's handwriting, was written everything he had read in the letter from his father. He knew now that his mother had thought it all out, and that she was just telling his father. The door shrieked open. Max crumpled the sheet sharply and turned around. It was a spaniel. With a wistful look, it came toward him and nuzzled against his leg. Max reached down and rubbed his neck. Max then packed up some of his things and left the house, heading to a friend's house where he was staying for the first time. Living at Julia's house was a little wrong for him. Yes, and there wasn't much room, since she takes customers at home without saying anything to her mother. Max got into a cab and drove away from the backyard of the house. Nancy went downstairs, calling for her son. Realizing she was home alone, she called Anthony again. The phone was still unavailable. Maybe it was for the best, though, she said to herself. What if something happened to the girl? A bright thought flashed through her mind. It's not my concern anymore, she reassured herself. Would you like to relax a little? The man asked, pouring himself some hot drinks. Anthony approached the girl and offered her a drink. She refused. What's your name? Julia? He asked after he had soaked his throat with a cold drink. The girl nodded her head. I don't understand your behavior. The girl said, looking around. It was obvious that the interior was chosen by professionals. I would not like to stay with you for a long time, said Julia. Let's hurry up. I'll take the measurements for your curtains. I'll calculate how much material I need, and then I'll go home. Okay, take the measurements. Anthony replied casually. Leaving the girl alone, he went upstairs and went about his business. Julia got to work. She hoped that since Anthony had recommended her to Nancy, maybe she had changed her attitude towards her. She had no idea that she was here for something else. All done, Julia pronounced, when she finally changed everything. No one was helping her with that. Sketch out a few designs for the curtains. She waited in the living room for Anthony to return. When no one answered her, she called out to the owner of the house once more. Silence alarmed the girl. She felt a little uneasy in such a large house. Anthony's house was like the dwelling of a dragon. Stone replaced wood and wood replaced stone. The sunlight barely filtered through the closed blinds. Looking for the owner of the house, the girl went upstairs. The different pieces of furnishings enticed Julia. It was as if she had entered another world that beckoned her with its uniqueness. The girl's attention was attracted by a statuette made of pure wood. It was a dragon, every scale of Inca. Each lesson was crafted with precision. Most eerie of all were the dragon's orange eyes. Standing just above her height, he looked confident, straight ahead, and without a drop of pity. The girl felt like touching him. She reached out to touch one of his sharp teeth. They looked just like the real thing. Careful, you can be amazed, rang out behind her back. Julia gasped. You finally showed up? Julia answered, turning to the dragon again. Whose job is this? She asked. I don't remember, it's some kind of craftsman. Anthony waved it away. Julia looked at him in disbelief. The measurements are ready, Julia said, holding out a notebook of sketches to him. You're not bad at sketching, she said. No one has ever drawn my dwelling so precisely on one sheet of paper with a pencil. Julia thanked him and smiled. I'll order a cab. Will you give me the address? Julia insisted, realizing that their conversation was on the edge of business and personal. As she was about to pick up her phone to dial the number, she realized it had been left in her purse in the lobby. Why a cab? Do you need me to drive you? Pronounced Anthony, but only a little later. I'd like to talk to you a little longer. Let's use the first name. Julia was confused. I would love to talk to you, but I have a wedding in 2 days. So I'd like to get home as soon as possible, Julia said. And it was true. I know. Nancy told me, said Anthony, and I put my hand against the wall so that Julia was sandwiched between the dragon and the man. Are you and Nancy lovers? She asked him, wanting to be discouraged by the question. But the man did not give in and answered calmly. Perhaps it seemed that Anthony liked to stuff himself with such games, not wanting any more part of it. Julia, with a sharp movement, kicked Anthony between the legs, then pushed him away. She rushed down the stairs toward the exit. But when she pushed open the front door, it was locked. She started to turn the knob to unlock it, but it wouldn't budge. Apparently, it was locked with a key that was nowhere to be found. Julia rushed to the nearest nightstand to find the key, but there was nothing there. Anthony appeared on the second floor. Endure the pain. He was already on his way downstairs, but he was in no hurry at all. On the contrary, he enjoyed watching the girl desperately trying to find the key. When the man was already a few steps away and the key was still missing, Julia rushed into the interior of the house. She didn't know where she could hide, but ran into the nearest room. She locked herself from the inside. Her heart was pounding frantically and her temples jostling. She was riddled with worry. A knock on the door made her flinch. Anthony's voice was heard. Julia, I'm sorry, it was a bad joke, he muttered. I demand my belongings and my cell phone with the address of your house. The girl said in a serious tone. Julia, understand, I can't do that. I promised one person that you would be here for a while, answered Anthony. He thought that a girl from the suburbs could be quickly lured to his side. What do you mean here? Get my phone here immediately. Otherwise, I'll have to make a very big mess in your house, said Julia. And she wasn't kidding about the mess. The cleaning lady comes regularly to clean the house, so you don't have to worry, but I can't let you out. I keep my promise, said Anthony. There was silence for a while. And then Julia heard footsteps. And a moment later, the sound of a door slamming shut. The girl realized he was gone. She pulled back the deadbolt, but the door was now locked from the outside. Oh no, Julia said. What was this nonsense? She couldn't understand why she was being kept here. And then it hit her. That's what Anthony had said. Nancy had told him to bring her here in order to keep Max and her from signing off. The thought made her head spin after sitting in silence for an hour. Julia wanted to go to the bathroom. Literally, need made her look around the room. It was spacious and bright, even though the windows were also covered with blinds. The room had a large and soft sofa, a couple of armchairs, and a wide table. And then my gaze fell on another door. Behind it was a bathroom with a shower and a toilet. Julia went back into the room and continued her explorations. She went to the window. It was unlocked. The girl opened it freely. At that moment, it seemed to her that all her problems were solved. However, when she opened the window, she was greatly surprised to find that it was at least 5 meters to the ground. What kind of paradox is this? She thought. But then she remembered that she had run down a small staircase and had come to a door that led to this room. Looking around the cabinets that were here, she found nothing of interest to her. This room resembled a meeting room or a study for privacy. There was nothing superfluous here. Tired of wandering aimlessly, Julia plumped down on the sofa. The hot day tired the girl, and soon she fell asleep. Meanwhile, Nancy was hurrying to meet Anthony. She wanted to pay him a decent amount of money so that he would stop torturing her and not make any more appointments. Anthony himself had called her, and the woman had rushed to take advantage of it. The driver was taking her to her car. Nancy was nervous. She was in a hurry. She wanted to get away quickly. Suddenly, the car stopped. "What's wrong? Why aren't we going?" She asked the driver, but he didn't hear her because he had already gone outside. A moment later, the passenger door opened, and the driver told her they had arrived. Then he gave her his hand. Nancy placed her own on his palm, and when she looked up, she saw her husband in front of her. William said confusedly, "You were supposed to." She didn't finish. "Isn't it good to have you home already?" she said, feigning joy at the reunion. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Anthony in the distance. He was walking towards the restaurant. "Weren't expecting him?" William asked, putting his hand on his wife's back. He had to cancel his business trip due to some circumstances. Was the surprise a success? "I agree," said Nancy, going over in her head the possible reason for her being here. "Let me walk you out," offered her husband, giving Vanessa an elbow. She laughed. "There's nowhere else to go. My tailor has just written that his plans have changed, and he won't be able to meet me today." Nancy lied, looming the foam in front of William's face. "What's with the non-seriousness?" William made a joke. "Well, then maybe the two of us can have lunch while we're here," he suggested. With a bright smile, Nancy agreed. Husband and wife entered the restaurant. Costas escorted them to a free table. Yes, and here it was not bad, William noticed, seated on a comfortable leather sofa. Nancy cast brief glances around looking for Anthony. He was sitting to her right and slightly behind William. "Yeah, I like this place too," she muttered, a sweet smile. Her cell phone rang. Seeing Anthony's name on the phone screen, she turned pale. Rejecting the call, she hid it in her purse. "Who is it?" her husband inquired. "It's my sister calling. She wants me to help her pick out an outfit for the wedding." Nancy lied. She was ashamed of having to lie. "Why didn't you answer it?" Sat down her husband. At this time, Nancy glanced at Anthony, who was dialing her number again. She held a concerned look on him for a couple of seconds. "What's wrong with you?" asked her husband, turning around. But by this time, Anthony had already left his table. Nancy sighed with a sigh of relief. It seemed that the tailor had come. "But I was wrong," Nancy replied as she began her meal. The waiter had just brought the appetizing dishes. After dinner, William and Nancy stopped at a place for a while, and then they returned home. "We haven't been paying much attention to each other lately," William said, stroking Nancy's hand. William was right. The various affairs were a great distraction from family life. It seemed that the person you had been with for years would always be with you, and you could spend time with them at any time. And in reality, that day keeps getting put off and put off for later. "Now I'll give you a relaxing massage," said William, and opened the drawer to pull out his wife's favorite passenger. "Oh, where did you get that?" asked William. "When I saw a beautiful piece of jewelry in there. I didn't tell you. I bought it for myself for my son's wedding." Nancy lied again. It was a necklace Anthony had given her when she'd rushed to meet him. She took it out of her purse and put it in a drawer. "I don't remember you ever liking that color combination," her husband said. He didn't show it, but inside he had doubts about Natalia's loyalty. Lately she had been distracted, according to the driver, often traveling to the same place for appointments. William lowered himself onto the bed and began gently modeling his lover's back with her smooth silk. The clear skin was driving him crazy. When her back, the couple claimed, he gently touched it with his lips. William opened his eyes. Dusk was thickening in the room. The sun had almost set over the horizon. He turned his head and saw that his wife was sound asleep. William silently got out of bed, going to his room. The burned screen of Nancy's phone made him stop. His eyes read the text on their own. "My queen likes to take risks." William wondered who it could be from. He felt rage filling him. He couldn't resist and read the entire message from a user named Anthony. The first minute, he wanted to immediately confront his wife. However, seeing the familiar name Julia in the correspondence, he decided to wait. Taking Nancy's cell phone with him, he went to meet his son. William drove up to his friend Max's house. His son met him. Together, they walked into the house. William asked if they could talk privately. And then he told his son everything. "Max, don't be silly. You can't get hot. You'll make things worse," the father said. Max walked back and forth with his hands on his head. "Now the most important thing is that the girl was all right," said the father. Yeah, you're right." "How do we get her out of there?" Max wondered. Only simple axe options came to mind. Night had fallen outside. The fresh, cool breeze was very pleasant. A black Jeep behind tinted windows pulled up in front of Anthony's house. The man was getting ready for the meeting. He put on his best suit, offspring all the best fragrance. He was glad that Nancy had come to see him again. Anthony opened the door and was stunned. He was sure it was his favorite woman, so he didn't look at the camera. Standing in front of him was William. His eyes penetrated Anthony through and through. The one threw into a sweat trying to pretend that all was well. He portrayed on his face a look of surprise, which was replaced by a smile and joy at the meeting. How many years, how many winters? Just like that, William stopped him half-heartedly. He launched a solid fist in a single blow, knocking him to the ground. Anthony went tumbling backwards. William entered the house, looking around. Max came in after him. "Where is she?" he asked Anthony with an angry look. "Who exactly?" Anthony turned on the fool and then laughed. Max walked up to him and, taking him by the collar, shook him properly. "If you've done anything to her, I'll give you a hard time," growled at Max. William hastened to relieve him. Anthony spat on the floor. "That's how karma catches up with a man. Now your wife and your fiancé are mine." He laughed, in spite of them. "Julia," shouted Max, and then went upstairs, looking in every room. While the men were downstairs, Julia, unaware that they had already come for her, found something to do. In the corner of the room, she saw a sewing machine, and to calm herself down, she began to sew. The space and conditions allowed her to sew. There was also a small refrigerator in the room, something like a minibar, and she got a couple of fruits and cookies and continued sewing. Time flew by very quickly. She didn't notice that it was already dark outside. A strange noise that hadn't been there before made the girl take her foot off the pedal and listen when she realized Max was calling her. She started to knock and called his name back. "Better hold still," said William, pointing a gun at Anthony. "Whoa, someone wants to play," Anthony said, slowly getting to his feet. "I'm not going to have anything to do with you," William replied. "We're here to pick up my son's fiancé." "I don't care about anything else," William said, so as not to cause more conflict. "Just like you took my bride from me once," shouted Anthony. And the next second, he had a gun in his hand too. "You know she made her own choice. And yes, I love my wife, even though—" William was silent, even though he had to finish the sentence. "She chose me this time," Anthony said, provoking William to more conflict. But in the meantime, Max had found the room where Julia was. But the door was locked. Max tried to break it down, but it wouldn't budge. Grabbing the nightstand in his hand, he rushed up the small staircase and with all his strength crashed into the door. Unable to withstand such an onslaught, it burst open into a lock. Max exclaimed joyfully, "Julia, I knew you would find me." "I felt it," she said, clutching Max to her chest. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" Max asked. "Don't worry, I'm fine. No one did anything to me," she replied. His embrace. Max and Julia were coming downstairs. The first to go was Max. On the corner, he noticed that his father had a firearm in his hands, just like Anthony. Max was afraid for his father. Julia stuck out her chassis, managing to cover her mouth. "Stay here," Max whispered. Julia lifted her lips, clutching at Max's sleeve. She didn't want to let him go since Anthony was standing with his back to Max. This allowed the guy to get very close. "You have to make amends," Anthony said, referring to the fact that Nancy didn't choose him. William answered well and lowered the gun. "Shoot. I deserve it," he said. Anthony felt the taste of victory and the approaching pleasure of retribution. He took the gun off the safety on his forehead. He stepped out, then another second, and there was a bang, and then a shot. Anthony fell off his feet. Max managed to disable him by hitting the huge statue. When he shifted his gaze to his father, he he saw a red stain on his shoulder, which he covered with his hand. Max quickly called an ambulance. The marriage ceremony began at 1 o'clock sharp. Julia was irresistible. The wedding dress, which had been sewn to her own pattern, was eye-catching and made her want to get one. Max looked at the bride with admiration. He could not believe that, despite the difficulties, their wedding had taken place. "Son, you're not mad at me." But his father asked him a letter. When all the guests gathered at the restaurant after the registry office, "No, Dad, you had every right to do that," replied Max, who did not care how much money he had in his account. "When there is a man around for whom you want to do real deeds, I knew you could do it," said his father, patting him on the shoulder. Max turned and saw Alexa's grandfather. The old man winked at him. It's good to take risks when you have a safety net in the form of good people, Max thought. Nancy, who had taken this desperate step, certainly felt guilt and shame. But Julia's sincere attitude and her husband's inner strength helped her to remain human. After all that happened, Nancy and William became estranged from each other. It is understandable that forgiveness takes time. Anthony, after coming to his senses, cut Nancy out of his life for good. The newlyweds were able to open a sewing studio. Julia came up with clothing models, created patterns herself, and Max was engaged in advertising and sales, not forgetting about the issue of a fashion magazine. Alex's grandfather continued to live in his old house. Now that Julia and Max had moved into their own house, he was finally able to get a cat, which he had not allowed himself before because of his granddaughter's allergies. The life of the townspeople went on as usual, and only the spaniel Herman was languidly walking around the house looking for a companion to play with.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Mason was stuck in traffic for the second hour. He was supposed to be at a birthday party for an investor half an hour ago. Drove straight from the clinic. Didn't even stop home to change. Miranda's wife called every 10 minutes to remind him not to be late, but he was. Such a terrible traffic jam was not part of the plan. It's unclear what happened there. The cars were standing dead. Every 5 minutes they'd move a meter and then stop again. All the cars behind, in front, on the side were already considered, and the draggers could be considered familiar. That car overtook by half a meter and now lagged behind by 1.5 meters. What kind of fun is that? In front, an old man in a Ford, some sticks with red rags on the ends sticking out of the trunk. On the left is a girl in an Audi, always talking on the phone and occasionally glancing at Mason with interest. On the right, the most desperate or the most brazen occasionally fly by on the side of the road. What's ahead of them is unknown. Mason wouldn't be nervous at all. Well, a traffic jam and a traffic jam. Finally able to rest, but imagined what Miranda would tell him when he arrived. Well, if he did. It's the wife calling again. "Where are you?" "I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here asking about you. Don't you realize how important it is for you to be here?" "I don't really understand the importance, and I don't understand what I'm doing there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic. Can't or won't. Miranda, I'll be there as soon as I can." Mason dropped the call. He doesn't need this reception. Let the investors talk to the clinic management. Why invite the department heads? What's the joy of celebrating a birthday in a crowd of people you don't know? Mason saw this investor once at the clinic. All of a sudden, he's so honored to be invited, and with his wife. He would have preferred to go home, spend a quiet evening, finally read 2 interesting articles sent to him a month ago. Instead, he goes to some party where he has to keep a straight face and socialize with uninteresting people. He's also indecently late. Miranda, unlike her husband, was glad of the invitation. She rarely got to attend receptions of this caliber. Or did she not want to look at others as much as she wanted to show herself? She realized that no one in this high society was interested in a school teacher herself. But she is with her husband, and this husband, damn him to hell, cannot get there. But those who ride on the side of the road go somewhere, don't they? Why don't you try it? Mason pulled off to the side of the road, rode the potholes for 500 miles, and got stuck in traffic again. Now on the side of the road. The curb ended, and the only way to get through was on the road. And those who patiently stood in a row were not in a hurry to let those who liked freebies through. They wanted to cheat fate. So stand there now, and in another half hour, Mason was back in the lane. Ahead of him was a Ford with sticks and red rags. What he left was what he came back to. It's ironic. Looks like he's only coming to the appointment to pick up his wife. That's fine. It's a shame about the time, though. We're finally getting going. And soon the cause of the traffic jam became clear. A terrible accident, 3 cars and 1 truck. Rescuers from the cars were scrambling around, pulling people out. Broken cars, machinery, as scrap metal moved to the curb, freed 1 lane for traffic. Drivers cautiously detoured around the crash site. Mason saw the wrecked cars of rescuers and ambulance doctors. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a man sitting on the ground near the truck's tire, a man with a crazed look, clearly in shock, and swerved toward the accident. A lifeguard immediately ran up to him. "Get back on the road. This isn't a circus. I'm a trauma doctor." "Well, and go ahead and do your job." There were 10 victims, all with serious injuries. The guy was badly hurt. His spine was severed, and a young woman who rescue workers couldn't get out of the car for a long time. Her 3-year-old daughter, scared and crying, was examined in the ambulance. Doctors dealt with the heaviest. The others with fractures and injuries were waiting their turn. That's who Mason took care of. The ambulances were leaving, taking out the injured, and others were coming in to replace them. Everything that needed to be done was done. There was nothing more Mason could do. Called the clinic. Prep the OR, they're bringing in a spinal injury. I'll be right there. Before he left, he approached the truck driver who was still sitting by the tire. He was sedated. He's got a clearer look in his eyes. "Any injuries? Need any help?" "No, it's my fault, doctor. What's gonna happen to me now?" "Not my question." "You, boy, pray to God that everyone lives." He never made it to his appointment. He didn't answer his wife's calls. He spent half the night dealing with the injured guy, passed out right in the office, and in the morning began the usual, endless hospital business. I didn't get home until the evening. Miranda had cooled down a bit during the day. If her husband had arrived in the morning, she would have thrown a scandal, not at all in the tradition of their intelligent family. How many times? She realized Mason wasn't just a good doctor. He was a first-rate specialist with a name and credibility. He works hard, takes on the most difficult cases, and manages to lecture. He's got time for everything except his wife. They do not go on vacation, do not spend weekends together. Every evening spent at home is like a copybook. He arrived, had dinner, tried to read some article in a scientific journal, and without finishing, fell asleep. That was it. Miranda did not remember when and what they talked about. There was no time, nothing to talk about. Most importantly, no desire. When their lives became separate and love was replaced by indifference. Miranda didn't remember. If she told Mason now that their marriage was cracking at the seams and their life together was more like good neighborliness, he would be surprised. What was wrong? Is everything okay? Really fine. No scandals, no cheating, quite a secure, quiet life without troubles, without love, without happiness. The most unbearable thing is that it's impossible to forget how happy they were. Miranda, a young, only after the institute, teacher with enthusiasm took up the education of the younger generation in a separate school, where she was sent by the teachers of English. She sacredly believed that the power of words can protect students from bad deeds. The main thing is to explain correctly what is good and what is bad. The beautiful impulses of her soul touched her students. They agreed not to upset Miranda. They only seemed to take patronage over the young idealist. They were sure they, in their 13 years about life, know much more than their naive Miranda. All the class went on hikes, to screenings of movie novelties, went to a skating rink or a beach volleyball tournament. In this way, in mutual illusions, Miranda brought her class to graduation. Apparently, her pedagogical efforts were not in vain, because after graduation, the students did not disappear from her life. They congratulated her on her birthday and Christmas, came to her with their troubles and just to chat. Teachers with great experience and merit thought that such trusting relations with students were an indicator of professional unsuitability. Our business is to educate. To make friendly relations with students is the height of unprofessionalism. There is not enough soul and time for everyone. It's probably just envy. For some reason, they didn't come to them to pour their hearts out. That's where Miranda met Mason at school. He was 12 years older than her, a mature and confident man. His son went to that school, and one day, instead of Mom, Dad came to the parent-teacher conference, passionate about his work. Somewhat out of step with the canons of pedagogy, the teacher had caught Mason's eye. He'd been divorced for 3 years, no contact with his wife at all. The separation was too nasty, and he saw his son occasionally. This day he went to a parent-teacher conference for the first time in his life because the ex-wife suddenly called and went hysterical, demanded that he immediately drop all this fucking business and run to the school to save his son. From what to save, did not explain why she herself does not run, was, in general, understandable, was not able to. Mason understood that nothing terrible, most likely, did not happen, but went to school. Gotta stay on top of things. And suddenly Ethan really needs to be rescued. After the meeting, Mason approached Miranda. He really didn't understand why his wife was so hysterical. A C in physics, a conflict with a classmate. It's not a catastrophe. Normal school life. Unpleasant, sure, but no reason to declare a rescue mission. Miranda confirmed there's no problem. Ethan is a wonderful boy, a bit withdrawn, but kind and talented. Mason has already realized that she has everyone wonderful, talented. She will justify the worst bully and find a lot of positive qualities in him. Amazing girl, there's not many of those left. Mason always came with flowers, gallant and courteous. Miranda's friend and history teacher Vanessa, in colors, told how the teacher reacts to the fact that this pale moth, infantile girl, who does not belong in school, picked up such a groom. Our women are jealous. They can't talk about anything but you. For them, teacher and nun are synonyms. You can't have a teaching career if you've got a man, or rather, not like that. You got the wrong guy. If you'd picked up a freak and tortured yourself, but brought him into the world, yeah, and self-sufficient, independent will not appreciate your, and therefore their selfless labor. A happy, loved, prosperous woman, what can she teach her children? How will she prepare them for the rigors of life? Vanessa, you're twisting things around. Half of our teachers are married. There are married ones. There are no happy ones. How would you know? And why are they making you feel bad about it? Why don't they just be happy? Tell me, if I was going to marry a good, positive man, what would you say? I'd wish him happiness." "Well, no one wished you happiness. They're all angry and wondering when he'll leave you. Come on, I'm not getting married." And you pull yourself together. Don't give them a reason to gloat. There's no turning back, is there? Miranda fell in love. So serious, so thorough, he even courted as if he had a plan. Everything clear. When, where, what time. It's understandable. It's a job, no free time. The fact that Mason was married didn't bother Miranda. It's odd if a man in his 40s had never been married. That's not what bothered him. He didn't want to hear from his ex-wife. It's odd to have been married for so many years. Son's 15 years old, and Mason never said a kind word about her. What happened between them? Why'd they get divorced? Mason told me he just told Miranda what he thought she needed to know. She'll never be in our lives. I wouldn't think about her at all, but there's a son. I've helped him and will continue to help him. I think you understand. He's a big, smart boy. He likes you. Don't worry, we're gonna be fine. It wasn't just fine. It was great. They took a little wedding trip. They rented a house on the coast in the Alps for a week. Sun, sea, mountains. And nobody but the two of them. Not because there was no one, just no one. Miranda looked at her husband, and in her head there was only one thought: how much I love you. How it happened that of all men on earth the best, the most extraordinary one was hers. She was ready to look at those gray and the most beautiful eyes in the world all day long. No one had ever been so happy. She began to seriously question her mental faculties. So dumbed down in part that she can't think of anything. Just her husband, love, happiness. All the following years, when suddenly a longing came, Miranda remembered a week of boundless and unconditional happiness. And it made her feel warm. She wanted so much to return to that place, to experience the same feelings, to remember how it was to be happy. For 7 years of their life together, she had never traveled anywhere with her husband. Love, of course, did not go anywhere, but became something ordinary, not causing the former delight. When he did not come to that ill-fated reception, Miranda, seriously offended, left alone among strangers. No one cared about her. The doctors at the clinic tried not to leave her alone, but everyone was in pairs. Everyone was a little uncomfortable, basically an intruder. When anyone looked at her, she seemed to be pitied, perplexed as to who she was, what she was doing here. She still hoped Mason would come. When he stopped answering his cell phone, Miranda called a cab and went home. She'd had enough of this embarrassment. At home, she stood in front of the mirror, a tall, slender woman in an elegant dress, with a beautiful and intelligent face looked back at her. She also felt sorry for this beauty. She cried. So much going, dreaming that everyone would appreciate their beautiful couple, would say compliments, and Mason would be proud of his wife. Instead of compliments, indifference, instead of a pleasant evening, longing and loneliness. And now she stands so beautiful, looking at herself, and quietly crying that no one needs her beauty, not even her husband. Half the night she cried, half the day she was angry. Then she calmed down. She decided she had nothing to worry about, and now he'll come and explain everything. Mason came. Miranda waited. Nothing. No explanation, no apology. Didn't even ask how she spent the evening. Either he doesn't remember the damn reception, or he thinks it's nothing. Nothing to talk about. She's eating dinner, reading a magazine, about to fall asleep. Here Miranda couldn't stand it, went to her husband, pulled the magazine out of his hands, threw it on the floor, and looking into Mason's surprised eyes, asked, "Where did you go yesterday? Aren't you interested in how I had fun? You left me alone and now you won't even explain. I had to go back to the clinic, Miranda. I was tired. Mason picked up a magazine from the floor and continued reading. And that's it. Amazing, such impenetrable indifference. It made me feel so bad. What could I do to get him to come out of his shell and show some feeling? Change? Die? I wonder if he'll notice or grumble that he's distracted from work again. Another sleepless night and the desperate loneliness of the morning. This morning was not good, not wise, at least not wiser than the evening. Not a single wise thought had sprung up overnight what to do about her self-destructive personal life. Miranda decided to take the tried and tested route. We should go to Vanessa. She always had a way of setting things right. Vanessa's loyal friend was a huge fan of Mason's. She thought Miranda was crazy. She thought there were no other husbands like her. She'd know better from experience. She'd been married twice over the years and considered herself an expert on husbands, both her own and other people's. Her first husband was a painter, a musician, a poet. Basically, 3 in 1. Life with him was a holiday. It was exhilarating. Vanessa said it was mostly in her head. He was fun and unpredictable. An unrecognized talent, an underachieving bohemian, a boy who never grew up. Vanessa said her husband was like trained animals at the circus. He seems to be trained, but what to expect from him? It's unclear. And having had fun and tired of the lack of money, Vanessa went to the other extreme. The second husband was a boring middle-aged bureaucrat. Not young, not attractive, but with means and connections. The presence of a young and beautiful wife sharply raised his authority in the eyes of his colleagues. Therefore, he did not spare money for his doll. In addition, his wife is a school teacher, somehow out of status. So now Vanessa taught at the university. Everything would be all right, but Vanessa couldn't stand his boringness for long. She got divorced and received a good apartment in the center of the city as a payoff. Now she was in full chocolate and in active search of the next husband. Vanessa honestly thought her friend was lucky. Handsome, intelligent, and a great doctor. He doesn't bore, doesn't drink, doesn't cheat. What more could she ask for? She'd never had a love like Miranda's before. She was left to dream and envy. She showed up, darker than a cloud with weeping eyes. Why don't you live in peace? Vanessa, he doesn't notice me at all. If I disappear, he'll realize it when he can't find dinner. He doesn't always eat dinner at home, so he won't find me missing right away. He doesn't care about me at all. When I went to college, I consulted with him. I couldn't make up my mind, and he asked me a month ago how I was doing in school. Miranda, aren't you exaggerating? There's something about the nuts and bolts in my head that don't match up. This isn't about Mason. He's a reasonable man. Yeah, he's very passionate about his work, but that's good. Who's so busy working that they forget their wife when they're away? What do you think, woman? Not really. Although maybe it would be better. At least it would be clearer. You, girlfriend, don't take it out on your husband. He's tired. He'll come to his senses and everything will be fine. For men like your Mason, you'll have to look harder. What kind of man I'll put in the basket, take to the forest, throw to the devil? Miranda wistfully advertised. Hey, girlfriend, where'd you pick that up? What kind of art is this? I'll take it out and throw it away. If you throw it out, they'll pick it up. Look, I really don't understand what's wrong with you. There's no such thing as crazy love for life. You've had it, but I haven't. 2 husbands and not one out of this world love. You're lucky, Miranda. Don't piss God off. Maybe you're right. What happened? Here I am again with my melancholy. You're welcome. My vest is always at your service. A few days later, All the news programs started with breaking news. There had been another earthquake. The country watched with bated breath the statistics of the dead and wounded. Rescuers and doctors from all over the country flew to Turkey. Mason was going to be part of one of the teams. Miranda, you understand, I can't not go. I'm needed there now. Don't worry, I'll be home in a week. Miranda watched the news like a bulletin from the front. Once she saw Mason in a story about doctors. Worried and called, he didn't always answer. My heart ached. Chased away the dark thoughts of what might happen. I mean, he stays out of the rubble, helps those who've already been hurt. Suddenly, there's another jolt. More dead and wounded. Mason hasn't called in 2 days, hasn't answered his cell phone. Finally, Mason calls. No, it's not Mason. It's an unfamiliar number. Yeah, I'm listening. Miranda? Yes. Your husband, Mason, was killed in the debris removal. We're very sorry for your loss. We're covering all transportation costs. They're taking what? What transportation? Are they talking about Mason? What do you mean, dead? Is everybody out of their minds? Miranda dialed and dialed Mason's number. He wasn't answering for some reason. I heard some kind of ringing in my ears, then some kind of rumbling. It was someone banging on the door. I got up, went to the door, stood looking at it, didn't know how to open it. Something unpleasant was said to me. I don't remember what. Who's banging on the door like that? There's a bell. Miranda opened it. Behind the door stood Mason's colleagues, doctors from the clinic. So they're here. Mason's not home. There was no birthday party either. Suddenly, it rang clearly in her head. Dead. Condolences. Miranda didn't remember anything else. She woke up when the coffin was lowered into the grave, screamed, rushed, was held, struggled in someone's arms and screamed. The next thing was foggy again. Like Vanessa, like Ethan saying something, feeding her something. When I came to, I was surprised I was alive. No, not surprised. I was upset. Why alive? Vanessa, like a guardian angel, always stood behind me and did not let me fall into the abyss, calming, persuading, drawing prospects, pushing me to action. In short, after a couple of months, you could talk to Miranda without fear of going crazy. To be honest, Vanessa hadn't expected Miranda to be so disturbed. Understandably, a loved one had died, but to be thrown out of her life like that. Vanessa looked after Miranda herself. Miranda recovered, went back to her normal life. It's dreary, but it's manageable. Gone are the thoughts. I can't live without him. I can. At least I'm trying. Things have settled down. I cried at night. Sometimes I forgot to suffer during the day. Then I remembered, but I didn't suffer so much. It was almost 6 months after Mason's death when Vanessa suddenly asked, Miranda, did you apply for inheritance? What application? Why? Actually, your husband had property, at least this apartment. By the way, whose apartment is it? Mason. Here. And he has a son, Hare. The ex-wife can't claim, but the son can. I suspect that you and Ethan will have to share the apartment, and if you don't enter the inheritance, there will be nothing to share. So run to the notary tomorrow with the documents. That doesn't make any sense. It never occurred to Miranda that she would have to share the apartment she had lived in for so many years. She was used to considering it her own. Only now, after Vanessa's words, she realized that it wasn't. She was registered here. She could not be expelled, but it was not her apartment. The notary turned out to be a young girl with stern eyes and not a solid ponytail on top of her head. She looked at the documents, accepted Miranda's application, and explained that Miranda would inherit half of the apartment, half of the car, and half of the dacha by law. she advised to make an agreement with the second heir, Ethan. How to divide it all? Who gets the car? Who gets the dacha? Who gets the apartment? Miranda was ready to give up the car and the cottage if they gave her the apartment. She simply had nowhere to live. Ethan probably wouldn't mind, but his mom was still there. Some weird message came through. Land and property tax arrears. Miranda thought at first it was for the cottage and apartment, but why in her name? All-knowing Vanessa advised to go to the registry and find out what kind of tricks. Oh, Miranda, I'm having second thoughts. This is not good. The doorbell rang. Miranda said a quick goodbye to James and went to answer the door. Standing outside the door was a not quite sober woman with permanent undyed hair. Shaking her red curls, without waiting for an invitation, she entered the apartment and went room by room. Who are you? I'm Pooh. Who are you? My son, the landlord. I want to live with my son. You don't have kids. You wouldn't understand, but I'll live with my son. But Ethan only owns half of the apartment. The other half is mine. Great. We'll live together, except roommates. How are we going to divide the rooms? Look, you can't be serious. We can't live in the same apartment, can we? I wouldn't want to, but if you don't go, we'll have to. You think about it, and I'll bring my stuff the day after tomorrow. Well, bye. What do we do now? What do you do in a situation like this? Run to a friend? So Miranda ran. On the way to the little house, Ethan called and asked her to come over. I wanted to know if the idea of living together was her mom's fantasy or their decision. Ethan was not reassured. The decision to squeeze Miranda out of the apartment, Mason's revenge, albeit belated. Ethan had talked his mom down, offered her options. She wouldn't listen. It's not so much the apartment as the desire to show her power. She wouldn't back down. She'd ruin her life any way she could. Ethan left, and the girlfriends were left to grieve. Miranda, why don't you buy half the apartment from her? If there's not enough money, I'll add to it. I'm afraid she won't sell. It's important to humiliate me. She dreams of humiliating me, ruining my life. She won't take money for such a pleasure. Ethan realizes that it's impossible to live like this, but she can't do anything. She has the idea to move in with me. It's fun and revenge for a miserable life. You should have seen her. She's got an ambition to kill me, and she's not going to give up that kind of joy. Look, is she crazy? Is she really going to live with her ex-husband's widow? Looks like it. Move in with me for a while, then you'll have to do something about the apartment, sell it, split it up. I don't know what. Of course, you're on the prowl, and I'm just running around here. No, girlfriend, I'm not my enemy. I don't want to be without a friend. Who do you want to stay with? With that crazy woman in the same apartment? Are you seriously considering that? No, of course not. I have an unfinished palace. I'll go and see it. Where? In the country. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's nothing like that. I only look 200 miles away. I've got to get my mind right. I'll go, I'll think, I'll come to my senses, and I'll decide how to move on. Vanessa, I feel like I need this. If I don't try to start over, I'm gonna die. I don't know. Maybe it will work. It seems like the decision has been made, but it's so scary to change the established, stable life on the incomprehensible prospect of life in the village where I have never been. But then some builders showed up, measured the height of the opening, and asked about the load-bearing walls. Clearly some grandiose renovation was in progress. Woman, are you registered here? Well, live here. No one is forcing you out, and we have an order. Miranda quickly put her things in her bag and rushed to the bus station. Didn't wait for the red-haired vigilant to show up. Enough with the nerves. Though in the queue at the cashier's office, I suddenly remembered that I had a car. I'd been kicked out of my apartment, so at least I could get my car. I didn't doubt that they would sue her for the car. They wouldn't deny themselves such a pleasure. But for now, it was possible to get to the village. Where I'm going? Why, how will I live? Okay, I'll get there. I'll figure it out. Strange village. Not a lantern, not a light. The time is 21 o'clock, and the village is dead. Either they're asleep, or there's no light. So where to next? Where's the Crown Estate? Yeah, there's people here. Apparently, cars are rare here. We crawled out to see if they'd tell us where to go. They did, but they were wary. What kind of a lady comes here at night? The lights are really out. There must be a candle somewhere, but how can you find it here? I shined the flashlight on my phone, found a bed, and went to sleep. I'll figure it out tomorrow. I was hungry, so I ate all the livers I had on the road. I'm going to sleep. There's nothing else. Miranda was sleepy and didn't realize where she was. I guess the countryside. There's no light, but there's a manor house. I have to look around. I'm also very hungry. Is there a store here? Miranda's house was impressive. Nice furniture, big windows, curtains, dishes, fridge, TV, everything. You could see Mason really wanted to live here, all thoughtfully and lovingly arranged. He didn't tell her anything, but he made it look like he consulted her. Miranda wouldn't change a thing about the house. She loved it. The house was abandoned and unkept, but that could be fixed. She stepped out onto the porch. It was beautiful, a real garden. Lilacs blooming, apple trees in pink buds, some bushes, the names of which Miranda did not know. Raspberries sprawled without supervision, growing all over the plot. Under the apple tree in a thicket of burdock stands a table. From a branch, hanging from a rope swing, the ropes are almost rotten. Behind the house, impassable cherry bushes, a solid white wall. Then I'll have to climb the plot to see what else grows here. But now it's not about flowers and berries. I have to find a store and buy groceries because I'm dizzy with hunger. There was salt, sugar, macaroni, a pack of tea, and a bottle of sunflower oil in the refrigerator, which was turned off, probably hidden from the mice. Miranda took out the groceries, turned on the refrigerator, and went to look for the store. From behind a neighboring fence, a woman of about 60 years old looked at her with curiosity, came closer and asked, "Daughter, who are you going to be?" The house was empty. I saw someone walking around the yard today. The owner Mason is here, a doctor from the city. Are you his wife? Widow. It was the first time Miranda had ever said that word out loud. It was harsh, hard, hopeless. Divided life into before and after. Oh, I'm sorry, old fool, minding my own business. My name is Aunt Clara, and I'm Miranda. Can you tell me where your store is? Just down the street. You'll reach the center. There's a store, a school, and the administration. If you need anything, you can come to me. Come on in. Thanks, Aunt Clara. Miranda walked down the street, looking at the village. It was interesting and completely different from her idea of rural life. Once while still studying at the institute, she had gone to visit her friend Adriana. It was her first and only experience of village life. Since then, Miranda was sure that the village was dusty streets with wilted grass, old, ramshackle houses, vegetable gardens with potatoes and cucumbers, and certainly no decorations in the form of flowers and ornamental bushes. A village is poverty, lack of amenities, and hard work. It's no place for flowers. Whether that village was in the middle of nowhere or whether things had changed dramatically over time. But now Miranda was pleasantly surprised. There were good houses in the village, a well-tended front garden in front of each yard. Even the streets were not gray and dusty, but green with flowering trees and bushes. The appearance of a new person in the village is an event. As we walked to the store, curious eyes peered out from behind every fence. About 15 times Miranda said hello and explained who she was. Vigilance in the village was at an all-time high. No one would pass unnoticed. Somehow the rumors made it to the store before Miranda. About 10 people came to see the townie. The store was full. No one bought anything. They didn't come for the same reason. They waited, wondering why they came and how long they could hold out. They're not mean people, but they're wary of anything new. They've all studied their own people. It's clear what to expect from whom. This one will give his last shirt. That one's greedy. This one rushes to help everyone. That one's a slacker. But these are all their own relatives, and here we don't know what's arrived. They say she's young and beautiful. Problems too. There are only 3 single men in the village. They don't have enough, and here's a competitor. They looked at Miranda, frankly and appraisingly. They began to ask questions cautiously. Are you coming to us for a long time? Or just for a week's rest? No, not a week. I'll stay here. But I don't know how long. What are you going to do? You're probably a manager or a designer. You don't know how to work with your hands in the city. Not really. I'm a teacher. That's good. We have a big school. We need teachers. But it's hard to live in the countryside. In winter, it gets so snowy you can't leave the house. It's good that we have gas and don't need to heat stoves. And you can't live here without a vegetable garden. They don't bring vegetables here. Aunt Lisa, don't scare the man. Why are you attacking him? A saleswoman stood up for Miranda. I don't bring vegetables. You won't buy them, but I'll bring them if I have to. Who eats these store-bought vegetables? Are we not going to share cucumbers and tomatoes? Come to my place. I still have some potatoes and carrots left. I'll give you some. Thank you. Ladies, do you want to buy anything? If not, go with God. It's a hobby club. Miranda got the groceries. It's a little heavy. And I need a bucket, a mop, dishwashing detergent, window cleaner, and a few other little things. I can't carry everything. You're gonna clean up? Yeah, the house has been closed up since last summer, and it's been filthy. Let's do it this way. You take what you need now, and the rest, along with everything else you need for cleaning, I'll be back in a couple hours. My fiance's here. He's taking me home for dinner. We'll load everything up, and I'll come and help you after work. You'll be cleaning this house for a week. My name's Nancy, by the way. It's embarrassing. Come on. I'm curious to know what kind of bird you are. Let's get to know each other. Oh, I don't have to tell Miranda. The whole village knows. Miranda came out of the store, took a look around. There's a school. You can see the boys running around in the yard, whether it's gymnastics or some kind of training. I'll have to go in and see what vacancies they have. Maybe we really do have to stay here. So where do we start our new life? We should make some food. No, sandwiches and tea first, then cooking, or I'll drool. After Miranda's sandwich, everything seemed fine. Life was getting better. Nancy's bringing in some chemicals. The first thing to do is to clean the windows to get some sun and shine. Miranda looked around the house meticulously. She hadn't had time to do that in the morning. Gray furniture, dim windows, dusty curtains. If everything washed, it would be cozy. Where's Nancy? I can't wait. Nancy arrived as promised with her fiancé, a handsome, smiling blonde. He may not have been a groom, but he was interested, looking interested, clearly trying to please Nancy. His name was Benjamin. We're all going. Benjamin has to go to work. Nancy pushed the groom to the door. I'll pick up the monkey from the garden tonight and come over. What monkey? But Nancy was already running to the car. The monkey was a little red-haired girl named Betty, Nancy's daughter. With the helpers, it went faster, and in the course of the evening they had cleaned almost the whole house. Just a few little things left to do. Tired, but encouraged by the result, sat down to drink tea. But the monkey didn't finish his tea, he fell asleep. Nancy, who's Benjamin, they say there's only 3 bachelors here, and one of the 3 was killed. You should have seen those bachelors. Nancy laughed. The most eligible is Uncle Sebastian. He's about 60 years old. You'll never get anywhere here. He's been courting your neighbor Aunt Clara for about 30 of his 60 years. For as long as I can remember, he's been a suitor, and he's never decided to propose. And the second bachelor is not looked at even by the most stale girls. 40-year-old Nikolai studied in Washington. They say he's a computer genius, works from home, lives with his mom, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't talk to anyone. His mom tells me he was married. The village doesn't believe it. Someone considers him abnormal, but all agree that he is unsuitable for socializing and even more so for marriage. The third bachelor is a dark horse, but according to Clara, a very interesting man. 2 years ago, a man came to the village with a teenage daughter. Everyone assumed he was a former athlete. First of all, he looked like that, strong, trim. Secondly, having settled in the village, he came to the school director and proposed to open a boxing section. The principal was not against it. It was a good idea, but not feasible. The school gym had not been working for several years. There was no money for repairs. The hall was almost in disrepair. Physical education lessons were held outside in the summer, running and soccer, and winter skiing. Then David, the athlete's name, disappeared from the village for a while. Then he came back with a decision to fund the renovation of the gym and a coaching position. That's when it turned out that David, a 3-time boxing champion, lives in their village. True, he hasn't been competing for a long time. He refused to participate in the World Championship. Why doesn't anyone know? How did he end up in the village? Also a mystery, but all the local signs said there was a woman involved. His daughter didn't talk to anyone either. She was a serious boxer. David took her to the district general competitions. Our girls, of course, became animated. They tried to charm him, but to no avail. He's kind of withdrawn, a loner. It's as if he and his daughter don't need anyone at all. He's only friends with Charles. That's the school principal's name. Bachelors, I see, but where did you get your Benjamin? Or is he married? No way. You don't want to mess with a married guy. We've had a couple of such stories. They didn't end well. Benjamin is from the neighboring village, right next door. Children from neighboring villages studied with us. Those who lived nearby were brought by school bus. The children from the distant villages lived in the boarding school. Nancy and Benjamin had known each other since they were in the 1st grade. As Benjamin told Benjamin later, he fell in love with Nancy in the 4th grade. Nancy was a bucket list girl. She liked one boy or the other, and she didn't notice Benjamin until her senior year of high school, but what a true, youthful love it was. Of course, for life, when it is impossible to breathe without each other, they drew a calendar and crossed out the days until their 18th birthday, when they could get married. Their parents were not against it, but they thought it was too early. He'd go into the army, then it was fine. Nancy went to high school. Benjamin went into the army, and city life surrounded Nancy. new impressions, new acquaintances, new love. Nancy got pregnant, and the father-to-be suddenly disappeared. He didn't appreciate the happiness. Nancy cried and came back to her mom. She also cried, said the eternal, "I told you so," hugged her daughter, and began to prepare for the birth of the child. Nancy avoided Benjamin. Ashamed to look him in the eye, she cried at night. She felt so sorry for her first love. It was the end of her love life. There would be no love or family in her life. One joy, red-haired Betty, her mother's happiness. Benjamin turned out to be a one-woman man. Couldn't forget his Nancy. Tried to live without her. Couldn't do it. You know, Miranda? He says he can't live without me. We have to be together. And we've wasted so much time. I don't believe him. How can you forgive betrayal? I chose my destiny. I'm fine, and I don't need anyone. But he keeps coming and coming. Everything's fine, and she's soaked to the skin. She chose her fate. Why don't you ask fate? Maybe she doesn't like your choices. You've been given a chance to get it all back, to be happy. So grab it. Why are you playing the noble game? I can't get anything back. I don't have a chance. Oh, Miranda, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting here complaining. What an idiot. Nancy, if you love me, don't be stupid. Now you've made mistakes. Don't make a major one. You won't forgive yourself. Oh, listen, what time is it? Nancy picked up her sleepy daughter. It's a shame to wake her up, but she's so big, I can't carry her. Bye then. I'll see you tomorrow. Nancy, thanks for your help. You're welcome. Miranda's been cleaning and scrubbing the house for a couple more days. She made it shiny and shiny. The house is clean, cozy, livable. It's beautiful. If she could just get the plot sorted out, she'd have an estate, but she can't do it alone. She'll need brute force. Well, we'll do it slowly. Sitting at home all day was boring. Miranda decided it was time to go out and at least go to school. The headmaster of the village school seemed to Miranda like this for some reason. He was not young, obese, with glasses and a tired look, a man tortured by problems, but he turned out to be young and energetic. When Charles found out that he had a certified and experienced English teacher, he was overjoyed. Miranda, you don't know how we work here, do you? I'm a math teacher. I also teach physics. The chemist teaches biology, geography, and the history teacher teaches English. Do you realize what level of knowledge? We have only German among foreign languages, and there are no other teachers. We study in 2 shifts. It's not because there are too many students and not enough space. It's because there aren't enough teachers. Come on, I'll show you the school. Charles talked about the school only in superlatives, proud. Miranda had not expected that a school in the countryside could be as well equipped as any city school. A chemistry lab, a computer lab, a language class, all on the highest level. Maybe the repairs are simpler, but the atmosphere is somehow homely, cozy here. In the gymnasium, in the far corner, there was a boxing ring. Students were crowding around it. Judging by the emotions and cheers, something very interesting was going on. Miranda didn't understand anything about boxing. She thought it was a muzzle-beating sport. What kind of sport is it, where they hit each other on the head all the time? Charles went to the ring. Miranda preferred to watch from afar. She can't even watch it on TV, much less live. The fight was over in the ring. The athletes took off their helmets, and Miranda was amazed to see a girl who had just waved her fists in the ring. A short, frail, pretty girl of about 15 years old. A tall, strong coach with powerful arms came up to her, hugged the girl, said something, and she nodded and agreed. David, the director waved to the coach. Come here. Charles, I have practice. Your practice can wait, go. What a guy. The principal is on a first-name basis with the students. All right, folks, but there are professional ethics. I mean, a bump on the head doesn't go unnoticed. Miranda, this is David, the coach. He's got all the boys in the village. He's got the little ones and the ones who've left school. David, Miranda will be teaching English, I hope. Hello. Up close, the coach seemed huge. He didn't look at all welcoming. He doesn't care about Miranda or English. A rude bore. At least he could pretend to be pleasant. I'm surprised his children aren't afraid of him. A girl who had just fought in the ring approached them. Charles smiled. This Kelly, our pride, is district champion and overall medalist. Daddy says she's very capable. She belongs in a big sport. That's my daughter, says David. I'm sorry, it's probably none of my business, but aren't you scared for your daughter? It's not a woman's sport, is it? Yeah, it's none of your business. Okay, this conversation is over. Time to go. Charles, thanks for the tour. I'll bring my papers tomorrow. Goodbye. Miranda went to the exit of the hall. She heard the principal quietly reprimanding David. Are you crazy? Why are you being rude? You horny bear. You don't take offense at Daddy. Kelly caught up with Miranda. You've gone wild with your boxers. You've forgotten how to talk to women. How'd you get settled in here? Would you like some help? I'm afraid Dad wouldn't like that. No, he won't. He's not mean. He's just unhappy. He needs to come out of his shell and socialize, but he doesn't want to. You don't have anyone here either, do you? Let's be friends. And Dad, I'm sorry. I know he's already talking himself to death. His conscience is killing him. He'll apologize tomorrow. Okay, we'll see. And you, Kelly, come by if you get bored. She's such a sweet girl, and she loves her daddy. I wonder why she called him unhappy. Something terrible must have happened. If a person is so closed in himself, separated from everyone, ostentatious indifference, and deliberate rudeness. Miranda liked the school, the principal. She decided that she would be comfortable in her new place of work. One unpleasant person does not make the weather. She is not interested in boxing. So the trainer can be ignored, communication minimized. She is starting a new life, excitement about the imminent changes. No one can bring her down from her joyful mood, not even such an unpleasant person as David. Miranda caught herself thinking that whatever she was thinking about that boorish coach. That was just the thing. What did she care about him? Miranda brought her diploma and employment history to school, wrote an application, and was hired to Charles' outright glee. Too bad it's the end of the school year, but from September everything will go according to plan. And now there is time to evaluate the equipment of the classroom, to add something, to correct, to prepare the curriculum. I had a lot of enthusiasm, and I stayed at home. Kelly often came to the office, chatting, helping, although Miranda promised not to communicate with David, but we had to see each other. He looked for Kelly after training and often found her in the English room. By the way, for the introduction scene, he apologized, as Kelly said he would. The communication was very concise. Hello, goodbye, how are you? Miranda finally got to work on the plot. It took a long time to gather her courage, telling herself that it was no big deal, that other people could handle it. In full uniform gloves, galoshes with a shovel and hacksaw, went to war on the thickets of cherry trees, up to 1/2 meter high, dug out a little more in no way. They have roots to the center of the earth, or what? Grow. Something dug out, something long and hard sawed. I got tired, sat under the apple tree, upset. There's enough for the whole summer. Kelly found her so tired and frustrated. Miranda, you can't do this alone. You're going to need heavy power. I'll tell my dad. He'll help you. No, that's not a good idea. It's not a bad idea. It's vacation time. School kids don't go to practice. Only adults, and that's 3 times a week. He cooked borscht yesterday. He'll start embroidering cross-stitch soon. It's better to use his bow-gator strength for the intended purpose, and it will be more useful. The next day David came. Miranda felt so embarrassed. He would think she was the kind of woman who looked for an excuse to lure him to a house in the country. Every single woman has tried that. She says something like, I don't need anything. I didn't ask. I can manage on my own. She thought David grinned. Oh, he shouldn't have. The awkwardness was gone. The anger was gone. He'd be grinning. You're only needed here as a tractor. Miranda lifted her chin and with a royal gesture pointed. The shovel is over there. At first Miranda could see David from the window, and she pretended that she was not interested in what he was doing there. But she tried to peep discreetly. No sympathy for this man with a nasty temper, of course, no. But it was impossible to say that he was not handsome. Then David moved to another corner. You couldn't see him from the window. Miranda bent as far as she could. No, I couldn't see him. After 3 hours, Miranda thought she was being indecent. She hired a slave and didn't even offer water. She took a bottle, went behind the house, and was stunned. No thickets, 5 gorgeous cherry trees, and some bushes along the fence. Just a delight. David was tired and asked for water to wash his face. Miranda brought a bucket of water. David took off his shirt and splashed in the bucket. Miranda didn't look, but her eyes somehow squinted in that direction. Nancy came through the wicket. Dan, what bad timing. Whoa. Nancy whispered. What's this about mating games? It's the season. Nancy, what are you talking about? Kelly sent it, and she has a dream and an idea for us to be friends. She's worried sick about Daddy. I'd be worried too if I were you. Daddy's good. He's not good enough to be your girlfriend. I am, but he's not. And tell Kelly that you can't be friends with him. He's not fit for friendship, only for love. Nancy, stop messing with me. What are you doing here? If you're visiting, shall we go inside? No, Miranda, I'm not visiting. I'm here to formally invite you to the wedding. Oh, really? You're such a rule breaker. You've made up your mind. Stop wasting time. We're getting married in a month. Of course, I could have brought the invitation later, but I'm so excited. I wanted to share it with someone. David, are you listening? I'm inviting you to the wedding. Nancy, why him? Miranda whispered so David wouldn't hear. You don't know him at all, do you? It's a whim of mine. I invite whoever I want. Well, I'm off. The groom's waiting. Nancy left. David sat on the porch and Miranda didn't know what to do next. She was grateful, of course. She should probably invite him to dinner. She imagined this lunch, sitting across from each other, chewing and silent. It's perfect. It's like a romantic date. If she doesn't think of something now, he'll leave. Isn't that what she wanted? And now you're looking for a reason to stall. That you liked him or Nancy's example inspired you. You want to get married? Yes, I liked him, that's for sure. Not everyone would go to a woman who shows her disdain as much as she can to dig cherries. And then he's so cute. Miranda hadn't thought of what to say yet. David had already put on his shirt and was about to leave. Kelly saved the day. She flew into the yard and slowed down. Oh, Daddy, I'm glad you're still here. Let's take Miranda to dinner. Miranda, you have no idea how good a cook he is. He also plays the guitar. What at the same time? No, at the same time. Kelly, did you and your dad agree on this? I'm fine with it. All of a sudden, David's coming out. Well, that's it. It's a deal. We'll see you tonight. They left and Miranda was surprised. How lucky that she didn't have to make the first move herself. David and Kelly were walking home and he hissed, "You're a smart and beautiful girl, but I think it's time to whip you." "Daddy, don't pretend. I can see you like it, Miranda." "What would you do without me?" "Thank you, or you'd be walking in circles for another year." "It's too late to whip you. You're 10 years too late." Miranda was going to visit, pulling out almost her entire closet to wear. "Isn't that a little flashy?" "No, they'll think she's dressing up for him." "It's boring. It's unfashionable. Here's a light-colored sundress with little flowers. Modest but tasteful." God, if anyone had told me she'd be dressed up and nervous about meeting a nondescript dork. I have spat in his face. What a way to turn fate around, huh? Dressed up and nervous. Dressed up, I went out. And there's Aunt Clara from behind the fence. "Where are you dressed up? You can't go anywhere in this village without supervision." "What do you care?" "Good man, get your hands right." "What's the matter?" Everybody knows, and she hasn't gotten there yet. The village knows they've got David. They're counting when to get married. Impossible people. It's understandable that we're bored and want colorful events, but not to such an extent. Although let them think, maybe it will come in handy. Dinner was beyond praise. I couldn't believe David made it. Well, how could I not? There's no restaurants around here. You can't order in. Kelly was radiant, talking only about her daddy, how wonderful he was, and what a sports career he had made. The girl really wanted her daddy to be happy. She remembered Mom, remembered what love was like, but Mom was gone. She couldn't allow her daddy to live a lonely and uninhabited life. She liked Miranda very much, and as she noticed, Miranda looked at Daddy with interest. Kelly set herself a goal. We have to get them together. And if the child is up to something, the parents are powerless. David and Miranda had another fight. Everything was fine, talking, joking. It turned out that David is not a bore at all, but a very pleasant person. "Miranda, who told you to say that?" Again, she started talking about boxing not being a sport for girls. It's like stepping on a favorite pet peeve. For so many years, David nurtured in his daughter's fighting qualities, almost brought up a champion, and now some city bimbo, a teacher who knows nothing about professional sports, says that his daughter should give up boxing. Yes, she doesn't embroider cross-stitch, but she can stand up for herself. If someone hurts you, you will cry, but she will fight back. She'll grow up to be a strong athlete. I guess it's my ambition, but I want my daughter to be a champion. If you had kids, you'd understand. It didn't hurt. He doesn't know anything, but it hurt. I finally liked a man, but it's like they're from different universes. They can't understand each other. Miranda was walking home. Kelly followed her. "Kelly, go home. I'm sorry I hurt your daddy again. There's something I want to tell you. I think it's time." David and Emily were a nationally known couple. He's the American champion. Brutal, macho, virile, strong. She's a slim and delicate model whose pictures were everywhere on posters, on TV, on the internet. Emily gave up her career as soon as she found out she was pregnant. No doubt she didn't need all that show business. A house, a husband, and a baby. Nothing more. Kelly's birth was awaited with trepidation. The name was chosen long and carefully, but they did not agree. Emily wanted to name her daughter Camille. She loved the name so much, David insisted on Kelly, When Kelly was born, the parents thought it was a miracle. It was useless to say that they were not the first, they were not the last. Others also have children. Others just have children, but they had a miracle. David wanted his daughter to be called Kelly, so he secretly registered the child and brought the birth certificate, in which the name Kelly was written in black and white for eternity. Emily loved her husband so much that she was not offended and did not say a word against it. Kelly, it's Kelly. No matter what you call it, it is still a miracle extraordinary. Emily took care of the house and the baby. David was lost in training and competitions. He was an American champion 3 times and was going to the World Championships. Kelly was 6 years old when Mommy got sick. She didn't understand what Mom was sick with, but she could see that Mom was in a lot of pain. It is now she knows that Mom had cancer, beyond the operable stage. We tried to treat it, looked for specialists, wrote to foreign clinics. All in vain. The worst was the feeling of hopelessness, the impossibility to change anything. David never left his wife's side. Constant care, medication by the hour. Everyone knew Emily was dying. Tried to keep her with him just a little bit. After his wife died, David withdrew from the World Championships. Kelly was quite small, and trusting her to her relatives was not something he could do. He could not leave her to anyone at all, even for a day, seemed to betray Emily. The sports career was over. The coaching job remained. Kelly everywhere dragged with him, slowly began to train, she liked it, and the ability was. His pupils consistently became medalists in competitions. He was proud of their success. Life settled down. The longing for Emily did not go anywhere, but somehow subsided. But then there was a change of management in the club, and the new director began to hint that medals are good, but money is better. David was not going to mix sport and business. He quit his job and left with his daughter for the country. At least here everything is honest. While Kelly sat in Miranda's kitchen, her dad poured his heart out to Charles. "How was dinner?" "Ah, it's not." "Look, it's freaking me out. What kind of woman does everything wrong?" "Well, don't go to her, come on." I can't. She's as annoying as I like." "Then conquer." That's the kind of pithy man talk. Miranda was already timid in front of David, and after what Kelly said, she felt like a complete fool who, knowing nothing about a man, managed to judge. And what's worse than judging? How many times Miranda scolded herself for her language. Miranda tried to see David less often. It wasn't her fault, but it was scary to look him in the eye. But he'd come by, clean the lot, fix the house. Of course we'd see each other. My heart sank, but I didn't have the courage to talk. Who would I ask for advice? Vanessa, of course. It's been a long time since we've gossiped. It's about time. I spilled everything. I didn't hide anything. Vanessa didn't understand what the problem was. Any competitors? Any interested parties? No competitors. You don't like it. I like it too much. My friend, I don't understand you. You went to a remote village. You ran into a prince. What's wrong? The prince's horse is dead, and he can't get there on foot. Do I have to propose myself? No, wait, not yet. I'll come back in a couple weeks. We'll figure out what to do. Charles said conquer. How? The whole plot's been dug up. The fence repaired. The taps and locks are fine. What else is there? And the answer is silence. Everything is decent, polite, and indifferent. It's useless to consult with Charles. He's already openly mocking. David is pouring out his soul to him, and he is looking slyly with the devils jumping in his eyes, and it is obvious that he can hardly contain himself not to laugh at the top of his voice. Charles, do you think it's funny? I'm turning myself inside out in front of him, and he's laughing. Yeah, it's funny. Sitting there, big guy, mumbling, can't tell a woman he likes how he feels. Of course it's funny to you. You got a wife, kids. I want a wife too, by the way. And not just any kind, but a very specific one. You're a Charles, of course, and I'm a boxer. If you laugh now, you risk getting punched in the nose. My friend David, when was the last time you climbed into a woman's window? What's windows got to do with it? It's time to climb. It's not about the windows, it's about the woman. Okay, you're the thin, ironic one. I'm the fat, straightforward one, probably stupid too. I don't understand your parable about the windows. Are you saying I won't fit through? I'm implying that romance is the way to go. Of course you shouldn't go through a window. The result is either a night in the police or a black eye from a frying pan. Flowers to give to in our realities is not an option. What are you there to bring her a daisy or roses, Aunt Clara? There's no movie theaters or restaurants. Look, I never realized we were so bad at romance. We talked a little more about romance, but nothing came up. Charles' wife, Molly, has been listening to the men talk for years. God, how primitive are they? Good that God first created them, and then, looking at his creation, decided to improve and got a woman. When I realized that the men had reached an impasse, I decided to intervene. What flowers? You also invite him to a dance at the club. Let the kids laugh. Buy a ring and go to propose. And if she says no, of course she'll say no. It would be strange if she said yes. Who gets married so suddenly? But she'll think about it, start evaluating the pros and cons. What does that mean? That you, David, will always be on her mind. She can't think of anything else but you. Isn't that what you want? Molly, do you think this is gonna work? It worked for Charles. If it worked, we should go for it. While David was devising a plan to win Miranda over, she had an unexpected visitor. Ethan arrived. Miranda was overjoyed. A family man, Mason's son. A reminder of past happiness. Ethan had come for a specific purpose, to persuade Miranda to return to town. He couldn't shake the guilt. Realized Miranda was in this hellhole because of his mother. Miranda, I've put the apartment up for sale. Half of it is yours. Obviously you can't get the same one, but you're going back to the city. I would never claim my dad's apartment. We've got our own, but Mom's got her heart set on the place. Why are you the centerpiece? I know she can't get back at Dad anymore, so she's taking it out on you. Ethan, why sell? She was going to live there. Didn't she even start renovating it? She started it and she finished it. Her goal was to torment you, and you just left. You ruined her fun. And without you, she doesn't need the apartment. Ethan, I'm not going back to the city. Maybe someday, but not now. You and me, we'll take a walk in the country, you'll understand. It's not a shithole at all. Look, what house? Have you seen the plot? I could use the money from the sale of the apartment. I really want a bathhouse. Ethan, I'm so happy to see you. How did you find me? Vanessa cracked. I can't say, but I thought there was another husband on the way. You bastard, she didn't even give me a hint. Ethan, are you coming over for a couple days, or are you staying with me? Miranda, Dad wants to know if you're coming over for dinner. Kelly was at the door. You have a visitor. I'll go tell her it's dinner for 4. Kelly ran out. Miranda, I think I'll stay over. Yeah, you can stay, sure. But this girl's the neighborhood boxing champion, so be careful. The village has long since realized where this is going. Only these young people can't make up their minds. What can you take from them, city folk? All those who had David in their sights realized they were out of luck, so they crawled away nobly. Of course, I wanted to make a scene. She came here and stole the only decent man, but what's the use? He wasn't too late for their delights without her. But you can tell him you loved him so much, but you let him go be happy. Noble. David couldn't think of anything romantic to do. Everything seemed fine without romance. Ethan's arrival made socializing almost a family affair. Lunches and dinners together, conversations over tea until almost midnight. Ethan didn't want to leave Kelly, and David was only too happy to do so. Charles and Molly pushing David. Don't be silent. She may not love you yet, but she's definitely interested. If you don't ask, you won't know. And Miranda had a visitor again. And what a guest! Vanessa is here. Vanessa didn't just come to visit on a rescue mission. She came to help her friend. She's missing. And Vanessa had some exciting news, but she was doing her best to keep quiet. We'd have to help the girlfriend first. Show the prince without the horse. We'll see who we need more, the prince or the horse. After the first dinner together, I decided that the prince was more important. Miranda, he can't take his eyes off you. He's a gorgeous man. I'm not talking about looks. There's nothing to talk about. He's so monumental in the sense of character. Miranda, take a good look. You'll never meet another like him. You know what I'm saying. But for some reason you're stubborn. I'm not stubborn. He's slowing down. Well, it's okay. We'll push. Vanessa, why don't you say something? Ethan said you're getting married. Come on, tell me. Yes, Vanessa was really getting married and assured that there were no mercantile interests in this marriage. Knowing her friend Miranda, I doubted that very much. The fact that she was introduced to her future husband by her ex-husband suggested certain thoughts. If it was the first husband, either an artist or a poet, you could believe that money is out of the question, pure love. But Vanessa's fate was decided by her second husband. There were no people in his entourage who believed in unselfish love. He invited Vanessa to some pathos reception. She didn't refuse. Who would refuse to go out with the powers that be? There Vanessa picked up a handsome young businessman who happened to be single. Now Vanessa did everything to change the man's status to married. Vanessa, besides single, do you know anything about him? Young, handsome, rich. What else is there to know? Well, he's not that young, but do you know he's rich? Or did someone tell you? He's a businessman, so he has money. Anyway, we know for sure he's handsome. Listen, you're a smart woman, and you're not poor, by the way. Did you ever think that you're someone's prey? You can't even tell me what your businessman's business is. Never told me what? Why didn't you ask? You've always been 3 steps ahead. What happened now? I can't believe you've been brainwashed by mad love. I don't know your businessman. I've never seen him. But men his age and with a lot of money don't get lonely. Miranda, what are you saying now? That he's a con man? And Alfonso, I'm afraid. Vanessa, it's just my impression. I don't insist. But take a closer look. Don't get carried away. You've already dived in twice. David kept trying to talk to Miranda. It didn't work. It's easy to advise, don't be silent and say it. Kelly is in the way, Ethan, who won't leave her side. And now Vanessa's added to the mix. Of course, you can find a place and a time, but David didn't. He was afraid. He didn't say anything yet. He hoped she'd say no, then he'd have to crawl away, and then have a live. One night, when Kelly and Ethan had gone to the club and Vanessa had tactfully left, David made up his mind. Miranda, you can see I like you, can't you? You don't have to say anything. If you say you're so nice, but I don't want to hear it. I told you so you'd know. You already knew. Now you know for sure, think, the step is yours. David, I don't know what to say. It's good that you don't know, but I have something to say, or rather ask. Miranda, I need some advice. David was upset with his daughter. He raised an athlete, a champion, and she suddenly said she wanted to be a lawyer. Why all of a sudden? So much effort invested, so much training, so much success. Now it's all for nothing. And she won't listen to anything. I got a job on vacation as an assistant in a law office. I drive every morning to the district. I've been enrolled in preparatory courses since September. I'm determined to go to law school. What do you want? She becomes a champion, then what? Have you ever thought how your daughter will live after graduation, even if she has a brilliant career, without education, without a family, without children? You don't have to say that everything can be combined. You know you can't. Your daughter is wiser than you. Don't stop her. We almost had another fight. We can't have a romantic conversation. Miranda has decided to talk to Kelly. If her decision is firm, Miranda will back her up, and Daddy can't resist too. David couldn't think of anything romantic to do. He suspected that Charles was mocking him, but the idea of climbing through the window came more and more often, but in the sense of romance. Then Nancy and her wedding came to the rescue. David was going to the wedding as if it were his own, even more excited. Newlyweds have nothing to worry about. They're determined, but he had total uncertainty. The wedding was according to all village canons. Neighbors dragged to the house Nancy and pickles, homemade sausage, roasted chickens, compotes in 3 liter jars. The men made a table for half a yard and appropriate benches. Nancy's girlfriends made up riddles for the ransom and contests for the wedding. Miranda was invited, but when she saw the ridiculous, almost over-the-top tasks for the groom, she declined. Wow, so how do you guys do things in the city? We have the internet. We can see, but we don't pout our lips or any other body parts, and we don't change sex. That's embarrassing, and we're just having fun. The wedding was epochal, one village on the bride's side, another on the groom's side. The bride had the tougher village, and the groom had the tougher men. There was no fight. Now the saying, "what wedding without a fight," is irrelevant. The bride was beaming with happiness. The groom shone like a copper basin. Betty lived up to her nickname, Monkey. She grabbed her mom by the hem of her beaufant dress or hung on Benjamin. Contests, jokes, toasts, songs, dances. The people had fun from the heart. Not often in the village happen events of this scale. Now there will be enough talk for a month. They'll be recounting who did what, who said what. The heroes of these stories will say, "It never happened." Maybe it didn't happen. It doesn't matter. In the annals of the village has already been written, and with each retelling will be added new colorful details. They say that if the guests sing a lot at a wedding, the life of the young people will be cheerful and happy. If it works, Nancy and Benjamin will be the happiest people on Miranda, and they'll be laughing all the time. The accordion player, Kevin, played all evening with a break for a drink. The people demanded songs. They sang the most heartfelt ones. Because Kevin did not have time to snack, in 3 hours we were left without accordion. The young people rejoiced they could finally turn on some normal music. They, of course, turned on, but after 10 minutes parents demanded to turn off this nonsense and turn on something soulful that for them soulful guys did not know, so they turned on disco 80s. They got it right. Even those who had never gotten out of a chair went dancing. David walked up to Miranda, extended his hand. Miranda put her hand on David's shoulder. They danced. David thought, this is it. Romance. Miranda's heart sank. She wanted to say her love, but it seemed like a man should be the first to say it. He didn't talk about love, but he said he'd take a step after her. No, I can't take that step. Why don't you say something, you big guy with no sense? The wedding was in full swing, singing and dancing, and Miranda suddenly remembered her and Mason's wedding. She remembered it without longing, without hopelessness, with sadness, sorrow, and gratitude. For the first time since Mason's death, thinking of him was just a bright memory. But the tears did come so as not to ruin people's holiday. Miranda got up from the table, walked out of the courtyard, and walked towards the river. She didn't want to part with her thoughts about Mason. The stinging sadness was no longer painful. Miranda felt like Mason was letting her go. She said to move on, be happy. Don't rush back to me, I'll wait. David went after Miranda, but Vanessa stopped him. Don't. Let her be alone. She's saying goodbye to her past. Don't interfere. David didn't let her go, but followed her. She understood. Miranda won't go back to the city. This is her destiny. She's a little stubborn, but she's not going anywhere from this man who's not much of a talker, so reliable. Oh, why can't she have any luck? It's always some fake prince. She wants love so badly. I guess to be loved, you have to love yourself. Fate is like a boomerang. It gives you what you put into the world. Miranda knows how to love, but she keeps calculating and guessing. I guess she miscalculated. Well, we're young and beautiful. We'll have time for that. Vanessa found Miranda. She was sitting on the bank, looking at the slow river, sat down next to her and hugged her. Don't be sad, my friend. Tell me, are you going to come back? Not right now. The school year has just started, and I can't leave everything. It's a bit scary, of course, how I'll live here in winter. But the others live. They won't let me go. Of course they won't, especially one of them, the big one. Vanessa laughed. It's so funny to look at you, just a beauty and a monster. The beast is very handsome, though, and he keeps his eyes on you. Miranda, what more do you want? You can't get Mason back, and David loves you. Why do you get such great men? Why am I any worse? You're a little hasty with the getting. Vanessa, what am I supposed to do? I like David. Kelly wants to get her daddy settled. She's doing everything she can to push him. Ethan's here for 2 days, but he's been here for 2 weeks. It makes sense. Kelly likes him, but I don't understand. Vanessa, I can't tell him I love him myself. He's healthy, strong. He's not afraid of anyone but me. Nothing, you'll get through the winter, and then we'll see. I'll go home tomorrow. I came to save you, but I don't seem to have anyone to save you from. I'm going to deal with my businessmen and my ex-husband at the same time. What a bastard, taking revenge by planting a con man. Well, I'm going to get out of your way. There's a David standing behind the bushes. It's getting dark. A huge moon hung in the still bright sky. The river was murmuring. One could hear the wedding singing, smelling of hay, flowers, and water. It's good here. David came over. Shall I sit with you? Of course, David. I know it's none of my business, but why didn't you get married again? It's hard to be alone with a baby. No, it's not. It would have been worse without Kelly. She saved me. I didn't get married because I was waiting for you. Miranda, why don't you stop beating around the bush? You see how I feel about you. If you can't see it, ask the village. They saw it all long ago. They sat side by side and looked at the river. Each of them was thinking about something else. David glanced at Miranda, though he wanted to look at her without stopping. He thought that fate had given him a chance to be happy again, had sent him this woman. But he can't decide to accept this gift. Fate might take offense. Why not just hug her, kiss her, tell her how much he loves her. On Molly's advice, he even bought a ring. Maybe it's silly, but if you don't have any ideas of your own, someone else's will do. Miranda thought about how you can't step into the same river twice. She was already happy. And the way she loved Mason, she couldn't love him anymore. And you don't have to do it the same way. You have to do it differently, with the experience of troubles and mistakes. Vanessa's right. She's really lucky to have the best men. Fate has kept her from making mistakes. They say fate chooses. No, it doesn't. It gives you a chance not to make a mistake. Miranda didn't make a mistake. She won't forget Mason. Just like David will never forget his wife. They even share the same fate, the same grief. Then happiness must be shared. It should be, but if David keeps quiet, that shared happiness may never happen. Come on, David, say something. David didn't say something. David did. He hugged Miranda, kissed her, and pulled a ring box out of his pocket. Miranda, will you marry me? Miranda was confused. There was such a look of bewilderment on her face that David laughed. It was exactly the reaction I had expected. That's what Molly said. Molly who? Charles, she said you'd say no, but you'd think about it, or not say no. I know it's the height of levity to think you'll say yes right away, but will you take the ring? You'll look at it and think of me. You will, won't you? About what? Who, me? Miranda smiled enigmatically and clung to David, thinking to herself that she was already thinking about him.